Welcome to the Whatever Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Atlas. I'm joined today by Roger Avary. He's a film director, screenwriter, and producer. He directed, wrote, and executive produced one of my favorite movies, the 2002 film, The Rules of Attraction. He co-wrote the film Pulp Fiction along with Quentin Tarantino, for which they won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay at the 67th Academy Awards. He also wrote the screenplay for the 2006 film Silent Hill and the 2007 film Beowulf. He currently hosts a podcast of his own along with Quentin Tarantino called the Video Archives Podcast. Roger, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so
it's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. Good to have you. So what's your current status when it comes to filmmaking? Are you on hiatus from filmmaking, or?
Well, that dovetails into probably another question, one that I've been thinking about recently a lot, which is, what is a movie?
Yeah.
Like, what is a movie?
I actually have a question on you.
Sure.
For you on that. I took a film class in college, and I don't know if I just had a really pretentious film teacher, film professor. The first day of class, he like nailed it into us that there's differences between movies and films. So I don't know if that's kind of like where you're going.
That is partly where I'm going. I mean, you know, we've seen a lot of transformations lately, culturally, sociologically, politically, in the arts, and in how we consume our art and our media. And this is, you know, we've taken, you know, a technology that we were using for about 100 years, and in a very, very rapid amount of time, we completely switched over from that technology, which was film, and moved to video, which digital video, but it's still video. And though they are seemingly similar, they're as different as oil paint and watercolor paint. You know, in England in the late 1800s, there was this watercolor revolution that occurred, this like renaissance of watercolor art, and suddenly it came out of vogue to paint with oils, and everything had to be watercolor. Everything was watercolor, and it was like this kind of revelation in the arts, and everybody wanted that thing that watercolor could do. Okay, watercolor and oil, they're both paint. They both make paintings, but they are completely different mediums that work completely differently. They're as different as oil and water. You know, you work with an oil paint in a different manner that you do with a watercolor paint. And there's a certain amount of, you know, fluidity that can be discovered with water paint, like randomness that occurs as the paint draws into the water. And so you can do things, but in the end, they're both paintings. But you would never, at least I don't think you would try to make a watercolor painting look like an oil painting. Why would you try to do that? And so as the delivery mechanisms have changed, which are not, you know, nothing has been done for the benefit of the consumer, the end consumer necessarily. I mean, maybe convenience could be something that is that the consumer has benefited from video delivery into the living room, but it's completely physiologically a different mechanism of media than film, which is celluloid, where, you know, light passes through optics and then travels through a gate. It exposes on the acetate silvers. You keep it in the dark and you hide it in the dark, and you take it to the castle and you give it to the alchemist who in his potion, you know, creates these little tiny stained glass windows. And then you have, because it's a mechanico-chemical art form, you take each one of those little stained glass windows, and by running light through it, just like a stained glass window, just like a person would do in church, looking at stained glass windows, and that's why there's this connection, like more than a connection. Well, actually, it is a direct connection, because movies are the campfire, though the way that we sit around as people and assimilate our myths and traditions together. Like we dream while awake. together inside the darkness of the movie theater, and we have this kind of shared collective experience where the electricity of our bodies is interconnected, and we're interconnected with someone else's dream that's being displayed on screen, and we're watching it in this very specific technology where a single image is on this spool of hundreds and thousands of little pictures. A picture is grabbed, it's drawn down while the shutter is closed by claws, the claw drag system. It registers into place. The shutter opens up and the light travels through it, and it flashes on screen for a 24th of a second. And then it goes dark again as that whole process happens again, and the next one is brought up. And that happens every 24th of a second. And once you've, what happens during that process as you're watching a movie is, as you look at these still images that are being projected on the screen, and they are still images. They're not motion pictures, actually. They're still images. But they're happening so fast that our brain becomes an active participant in the assembly of these still images into the illusion of motion. And we do this through a process called persistence of vision, where our brain is like remembering what came before and then basically doing what a computer does, is the in-betweening between the two frames. And what results is this kind of beta cycles in your brain, actively working to assemble all of this, and you become an active participant to the movie that you're watching. Okay, video works differently. Video and Barco projectors now, even though they're progressive scan and even though they're fantastic technological developments, and I'll talk about how great they are in a moment, but they work differently and they work physiologically different. Okay, so the capture mechanism is different. Light still travels through the lens, but as it travels through the lens, it doesn't go through a gate, it doesn't strike acetate and expose silver, it bounces off of a gold sensor. And the light actually bounces off, and some of it actually goes back into the lens. And this creates a little bit of flatness that happens in motion pictures, in movies that are captured on using modern digital video techniques. And so this it flattens the image. And so in order to
it's visual.
It's both visual, but there's also a physiological component to it, which I'll get to in a moment. But it used to be that when we were shooting a movie, like when I shot Rules of Attraction on film or when I shot Killing Zoe on film, we would shoot with the sun behind us. There was an axiom that we used to use in the business that at the end of every shooting day when you go home, the back of your neck is sunburned because you've had the sun behind you. Movie set today that's being shot with modern digital video cameras, they've rotated that, and they're now shooting 180 degrees in the opposite direction into the sun.
Okay.
And that's why there's so many lens flares in modern movies, and that's to create the illusion of depth, because the sensor doesn't have the depth. And so cinematographers, working with the tool that they have, are now, literally rotating the camera 180 degrees and shooting in the opposite way. On top of that, you've got Video Village now and all sorts of stuff. It's changed the way we capture things. Like in the old days when we were shooting on film, there was this notion of I'll see you in the moment. Like the actors would say that, see you in the moment. And that moment was the moment when you're actually spending money. When you're spending money is when you're burning film. It's like 4 cents to capture the image. It's another 6 cents to process it, or something like that.
It's expensive.
You're paying 11 cents a frame. You're cranking through. You've got 24 for every second. Imagine however many seconds you've got in a movie. That's a lot of frames.
Multiple
you've got to shoot.
Too, right?
You've got to do all that, and so there was this enormous amount of preparation that we would take, before production, and we still do that because, well, I'll get to that in a moment.
Sure.
There's this enormous amount of preparation that we would do where everything is futzed with and everything is made to be just perfect, and the actors are working their lines and everybody's kind of preparing, and then I'll see you in the moment. We all show up on set and there's this energy that builds and the cameras are ready and action. And in that moment, you can hear the purr of the camera, and you know that that's money. You're spending money. And suddenly, in that moment, all that preparation leads to a kind of an energy release, which we used to call capturing lightning in a bottle. And you don't even know you have it because you have to send it away to the lab to have them process it. And then you'll see the next day if you have it. And so this created a kind of 100-year-long process and rhythm that we would employ on productions of, of this. And there was this kind of voodoo dark magic of capturing, an image even. A really good cinematographer, Roger Deakins, who, now shoots everything on digital. He would go out and, he knows that when he's shooting something, he's got 7 layers of degradation between capturing the image and when you're going to see it in a movie theater. Not even talking about the telecine that occurs afterwards once you transfer the tape. And so, he knows what's going to happen to the movie during that process. And that was a kind of dark art that cinematographers and the lab people and all of that knew how to do. That's gone. That's gone. There's a colorist on set now. They've got a giant monitor, just like your monitor here. Every single executive and broadcaster and producer and their friends and their girlfriends, they're all stuffed into Video Village, and they set up a little tent. They've got their monitor, and they've got all the chairs. They've got everybody setting them chairs and bringing them lattes, and everybody sits around and they watch the movie and have like a little coffee clutch together. Okay, in the old days, I didn't have Video Village. In fact, I didn't even have Video Tap. I had to stand next to the camera when I made my first film so that I could look at the actors. And I would trust my cinematographer. In those days, it was a guy named Tom Richmond who shot Chocolate War and Midnight Clear, a bunch of Keith Gordon movies. Really a savant, really brilliant guy. He's dead now. We would shoot it, and then I would turn to him and I'd say, "Did we get it?" And I would have to trust him. He would say, "Yeah, we got it," or "No, I bumped the camera a little," or "The actor moved a little," or "We checked the thing afterwards and there's a hair in the frame," or something like that. You have to redo it, and so you never really. There was like this kind of energy and excitement. Okay, now people show up, they come onto set, there's a little bit of a different vibe. We're still doing all the preparation and everything. We're still pretending that we're making film, but we're shooting a completely separate medium, as different, I would suggest, as oil and watercolor. And now this, when we are shooting, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, okay, it's the cheapest part of the process. You're just capturing stuff. And Fincher, for example, he deletes takes like they're emails. Like, didn't like it, didn't like it, didn't like it.
Gone, yeah.
Gone. Just delete it and save the space. And directors are now just letting the camera run through takes and giving direction in the middle of a take. And I first noticed this from commercial directors before all of this, before the transformation occurred in media. And so suddenly, it's a different medium altogether. It's a different process altogether. We capture it differently. People are talking in the middle of the takes. Hey, go back and do that line again, but instead of laughing at that line, laugh at the line afterwards and just smile between then. Okay, but you're keeping the camera running, right? Because now all of a sudden it costs money to stop the camera. Every time you stop the camera, it's time. And so once you stop shooting, now you've got to reset and get everything perfect and go again. So now people are just like, just let it roll. Do it again. Do it again. And editors are now separating takes, within the editing room. Okay, so what has happened here? The moment has changed, first of all. The actors are no longer being respected the same way that they used to as far as preparation goes. I won't say that's always the case, because there are tools, there are ways to use digital video that is better than film. Like, for example, because you can let a mag run for 10 minutes or whatever, you can take an actor and draw them theater-like into it and let them fall deeper. I locked an actor into a room with the camera and had him pace back and forth, and he was just wondering, when are they going to say cut? And I just let it run and run and run until he started getting over that thought and started not knowing where he was, which is the technique that Kubrick would always use. Everybody talked about how exacting Kubrick was. He's not exacting at all. He didn't know what he wanted. What he knew he didn't want was preparation. He wanted to take people's preparation and break it. It's like he wanted to take whatever the actor has done, and he doesn't want them coming in and doing lines and acting and using the Meisner thing. Oh, when you say that to me, I feel this, and that causes me to reflect onto you. No, Kubrick wanted to take you and do so many takes that you didn't know where you were anymore. You forgot what was happening. You don't even know what words are coming out of your mouth. And in that moment, you're touching the divine. And so what it was really about was wearing people down. You only use your preparation for when inspiration doesn't strike. Okay, so I've been talking nonstop, but that's kind of how I am. Video, when you watch it on a Barco projector or on a television, ever since the days of scan lines, what's happening is you're looking at an image and the pixels are being refreshed, and they're being refreshed at a certain cycle rate, and it's just how the electronics of a camera work. And what this does, because what's happening is pixels are just being overwritten constantly, and there's sort of a cycle that it occurs by, but even in progressive scan cameras. But effectively, what it does to you physiologically is it activates alpha cycles in your brain. These are relaxation cycles, which is why you can kind of veg out watching Netflix for an entire season in one night if you feel like it, because it's actually, your television is actually, and your phone, by the way, which is doing it at like 120 cycles per second, it's actually activating alpha cycles in your brain. It's relaxing you. It's causing you to fall into the piece. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's physiologically different than the beta cycles that are activated when you're looking at still images that are projected onto a movie theater screen on traditional film. So there is a physiological difference from an MIT study that I read that between the two mediums. Okay, so why do we have these two mediums now if they're so different? If they behave so differently, and most people can't tell. Most people go to a movie, they just want to see a movie, and they just it's moving images. It's a movie. And so if you say a movie, I think a movie, I think it's taken me like half an hour to answer this first question. If you say a movie, I think that is anything that's moving. A movie is a movie now to me. A movie is only defined by length. And now we're talking about lawyers and actuarial accountants and guys who work for the big 5 studios, who are like literally a bunch of lawyers and actuarial accountants in Century City, sitting in those 2 triangular skyscraper buildings, dictating, what the aspect ratios are and all of this stuff. And suddenly you're like in kind of their land. And in their land, it's like, how can we, if the audience doesn't care, what do we care? Because what we care about is money. And what we care about is making as much money as possible. And at a certain point, people realized that home video was where the money was at. Home video divisions are the powerful divisions inside of a studio. Those are the guys that make decisions at the studio. It's the home video guys. It's not the theatrical guys. The theatrical windows are relatively short, and it's kind of a gamble, and it's like it's a little bit different.
But that's gone now, though, right? The home video, the DVD.
That home video and DVD is gone. No, they still make DVD. They'll still make home video for. And actually, I personally like physical media because I come from the era where I was raised reading The Great Gatsby and learning about what it means to have books on your bookshelf about you. It's not necessarily for you to go back and look at your library. It's for the people who come and visit your house to understand who you are. And so you look at my video collection, maybe you understand a little bit about who I am, about what movies I have. And I like to own my media. Like, for example, do you know right now, today, this moment, at least, I could be overstating this. This was like a week ago. You cannot get Raiders of the Lost Ark streaming. Or Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And I don't think you can get the third one either, whatever that third one was called. And so all of a sudden, like, people who have physical media are like, I'm going to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark tonight. And so there was this move in the early 2000s, largely because of the explosion of the internet that was occurring, where everybody suddenly was like, I'm a minimalist. I'm going to get rid of all this shit. I'm going to get rid of all my records. I'm going to get rid of all my CDs. I'm going to get rid of all my movies and everything. It's all available, somewhere. I can just watch it online. And that's half true. Until you take those guys from the big five, those actuarial accountants and lawyers and everything, who are actually the ones dictating what medium you watch and like how it's made. Like what I'm getting at, I guess, is that the move to video has had a it's had a wonderful effect actually in indie cinema, because it makes it possible for people to make a movie on an iPhone, for example. A friend of mine made a movie on an iPhone. I had it released in Galaxy theaters, Galaxy cinemas. Played all over. It was shot on an iPhone. He had his students make the movie. It's like he's a film teacher. He's a French filmmaker I know who was teaching cinema, and he made a movie. And so I went ahead and I got the movie released. You know what? You put that iPhone movie up on a big screen, and audiences come in. They don't care that it's an iPhone. They do not care at all. However, there is a physiological difference about how the media is affecting them by the delivery mechanism of it. And anybody who doesn't believe me, cruise on down to the New Beverly or to the Vista, to Quentin's Theater, and go check out a couple of movies that are being projected on film. You might discover that the films are faded, that there's some gate weave and scratches here and there, and that the sound pops, and that it's this kind of tactile, physical experience. But it is a different experience entirely, and people don't really have that anymore because it's gone away, largely because people don't really there's not a lot of film projection theaters out there anymore, which is kind of something of a shame.
Yeah, with the DVDs and the VHS, then they move more into the DVDs. At least what I heard when it came to mid-budget films kind of disappearing is that a lot, like, the studios would kind of bank on, well, we're not going to make a ton of money on the theatrical release, but there's more opportunity there financially to make it from DVD sales, this sort of thing.
Well, when the streaming model came about, it kind of changed things. It took away the power of the curator, who is the guy or woman who in their gut feels like, hey, audiences are going to love this movie. Audiences want to see the story of Billy Hayes told on screen. They want to see Midnight Express from a book into a movie. I believe in this film, and we're going to spend money on it. We're going to go out and make it in Turkey and blah, 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 blah. You don't know if anybody's going to want to see that. Your gut is telling you that. And there was this hit-driven model, is what it was. There was like a model where we're trying to get a hit. Okay, that model's kind of gone because it's a subscription-based now. Now it's a formula-based model.
Right.
Because your movie doesn't have to be a hit. It gets thrown in the stream. If I told you I'm going to take your work of art and I'm going to throw it in a stream, what's going to happen to it? It's going to drift downstream. It's going to get lost in the stream, and there's no accountability. You don't know if anybody's even seen it. Maybe they tell you, 1 billion people watched your movie. You don't how, really? Do I know? Were there butts in seats? How do I know that?
Right.
Did anybody leave their house and go into a movie theater to sit with other people, sit with other people in a dark theater and spend their time away from their home and watch a movie. Like, that is something to get people out there to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And now there's no model. Now it's literally like, the streaming service will buy it. If you make your movie, and actually this is the real model right now, you make your movie for under 10, you get like 3.5 from subsidies somewhere, like you run off to Atlanta, Georgia, or Canada, or maybe you really want to get some, gas in your engine and go to like Hungary or some nightmare backwater place in Eastern Europe where where they have legitimate slave labor that you can use, and make your movie cheap. And actually, I think that movie, The Brutalist, I don't know enough about it, but I'm told
they're using slaves in films.
Well, yeah, actually, you know what? I think, was it Warner Brothers that on one of their movies, they actually did. They were using Uyghur labor.
In China.
In China.
Yeah.
And there was this whole, because, Hollywood is, interconnected now with... it's no longer the MPAA. It's now just the MPA. Have you noticed that?
I didn't know. For the
Motion Picture
system,
Association
right?
of America is no longer, you no longer see MPAA on a movie. It's MPA. It's the Motion Picture Association.
Okay.
There is no America to them.
Interesting.
Even though all they really are is a Washington lobby.
Right.
I mean, that's really all the Motion Picture Association is.
Is that because of like Chinese influence? Or
No. It's always been that. It's always been that. It's the whole idea of the Academy is, let's get a little bit more juice out of our product and let's put on an award show. And this best film, this was the best film, and now everybody's got to go see it. I missed that. I'll go see it in theaters. So you get an extra little couple weekends out of your film. At least that's how it used to be.
Okay.
Now award shows are kind of irrelevant. It's like, what does it even mean? Like, I'm not sure what a movie is anymore. If you're making it for, like, it used to be a TV movie when it played on TV, like,
made for TV.
Yeah, it's made for TV. It's a made for TV movie. That's what we call it. And these are shot on video. And to my eye, it looks like a Venezuelan telenovela. But most people can't tell. Like, it's like, but really, what is it? And how long is a movie? Like, the Academy is the one who tells you how long a movie has to be. Like, those lawyers have gotten together and they've said whatever it is, 60 minutes or 68 minutes or whatever metric they landed upon, that whatever rule that they had that said that is a feature film. Like, what does that even mean anymore in this day and age, when we can, with the way we consume media and how we consume media, and the other thing is, I talked about some of the benefits of shooting on tape, on digital. And there are legit benefits. One of them is cost. I mean, the reason I think what has happened is we've changed it, because we've changed to shooting on video, mostly because the delivery mechanism, at the end is video. It's people are watching it on screen, so you may as well shoot it on. Has Fincher been shooting anything on film lately? No. Why would he? He's making movies for Netflix. Like, that's the Fincher we have now. So you get Mank that looks to me like, I think Mank is, and I apologize to everybody who worked on Mank, because I know how hard they worked on that film, but I think that is such an ugly movie. I think it's such a butt ugly movie, and that it makes it actually hard for me to engage in the probably stellar performance that's happening in that film.
Are there any directors out there that are still working with?
Well, yeah,
with
Christopher Nolan, Quentin.
Okay, got it.
But if you have to be Christopher Nolan or Quentin, actually, what am I saying? Yes, there's plenty of people making movies. Sean Baker, he kind of floats around and shoots on whatever. Giovanni Ribisi is now a DP. He's actor who I love, and I've now discovered that he's actually shooting films now, and he's making the case that it's actually cheaper to shoot on film.
Really? Okay,
and
that's interesting.
so I want to hang out with Giovanni Ribisi. Is like that's the minute I heard that, my daughter, he was on her show, and the minute I heard that, I was like, okay, I want to hang out with Giovanni Ribisi. I want to talk to Giovanni Ribisi about film if he's believes in it that much.
Interesting.
So
I guess going back to the movies versus film thing, I think he was also, at least the college professor that I had when he was making this distinction, even if you had two films, or well, movie that they were shot on film, one could still be a movie and the other could still be a film in terms of like.
So he's thinking about it, yeah. You know, Quentin sometimes he would say like, you know, a Merchant Ivory film.
Yeah.
You know, Room with a View. It's from a, you know, James Ivory film from a novel by E.M. Forrester, and it's got British actors and they're acting, and it's like now that's a film. Like to Quentin, that would be a film.
Right.
Okay. Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Okay, that's a movie.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to call that a film. Like that's kind of where he's coming from.
I see. Okay.
And I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand that. He's not entirely wrong. He's making there was no, when he was saying that, he was probably not in the age of the death of photochemical cinema. You know, he was probably, you know, film and video were happily coexisting for the longest time.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's weird is why must one die for the other to live? Like, you know, one of my problems watching period pieces now, you know, whenever I see somebody makes a movie about, you know, God, I don't know, some period piece. Somebody makes a period piece with Timothée Chalamet playing whatever his name is, playing you know, some king, even though his head has like his neck has this like iPhone neck that that king never would have had. But you know, when I see a movie that's like shot on video, it just it drops. I have and maybe this is just my problem, and it's okay if it is, but I can't engage with the film as easily. When I watch a movie that's shot on film itself, it's like, I don't know, I feel this kind of depth. It feels painterly. I recently watched Franco Zeffirelli's Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. I cried while watching it for the beauty of the film. It's like Franco Zeffirelli, like I liked Franco Zeffirelli. His Romeo and Juliet's a really good version of Romeo and Juliet. Or at least I like it. I think Quentin was poo-pooing it the other day, but you know, and so I've liked, you know, some of his movies, but it's never really been my thing. And I was shown Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon when I was in, I think I was in high school. Some English teacher showed it to us, and I remember, you know, I could barely remember it. Actually, all I remembered was sort of, okay, I know it's about St. Francis of Assisi. That's basically what I could remember. I start watching the movie again. The light, the quality of the light, and I think I'm trying to remember who the DP was, like Giuseppe Rotuno or somebody like that. I can't remember who it was, but the quality of the light was so painterly. It looked like paint on the screen. The costumes were like, the way the light landed on the costumes showed off how beautiful these costumes were. Like this is the height of Cinecittà Italian film production, and so they have these amazing costumes that are not really period accurate, I don't think, but they are bejeweled and just like incredible to look at. And then you have this like movie that is immensely difficult to capture because it's on film and they're shooting on these locations in Italy and Spain and with these castles and fields, and they're capturing wildlife, doing things, birds, and like this insane imagery that's flowing through that is so absolutely beautiful. I haven't seen anything that affected me like that brought me to tears while watching on tape. What I see on tape usually is I see a lot of dialing into the yellow because these cameras, the sensors like yellow. And so suddenly you notice every movie has gone yellow. You can't make a movie with white in it. Everything is fucking yellow. And then everything is dark as can be. Denis Villeneuve can't make a movie without it having it being the LUTs in it just being dialed down to almost invisible.
Did you see Game of Thrones?
The Game of Thrones,
like
that final battle, like where you're kind of where somebody's trying to make some kind of point about darkness and battle and the darkness and it's a movie reality. And actually, and this is something where movies have transformed also a little bit. And this is the part that isn't the technology driving it, at least I don't think it is, then more than it is the culture driving it. Is I completely forgot what that point was.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. It doesn't matter. I'm like, you get me talking about this anyhow.
What about what is the
Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon? Everybody should check out this movie on. I'm sure there's a beautiful transfer of it on Blu-ray. I watched it on DVD, but I'm sure that there's an amazing transfer on Blu-ray. And there's something that's been lost in modern cinematography. I mean, we can do so much, and yet we're holding ourselves back at the same time. Like we're trying to make movies look like movies, and you may not have liked it, and I'm not sure I liked it, although I think I did. The Speed Racer movie that the Wachowskis did.
I didn't see that one.
Okay, so the movie kind of, like, seems like a lot of people had a problem with it. Like, it didn't land with a lot of people because it was so, like, over the top. But I think what they were doing is they were saying, like, hey, film's over. Nothing holds us back now. Let's go. And I think that's really what we should do now. Look, if film is dead, if the business has killed it, if it's been abandoned by the Academy, if the only person fighting for it is Quentin, Christopher Nolan, and then a couple of people who have no power to do anything about it, like me, like, what am I fighting for it for? Right. What's the point? Like, it's hard enough for me to get any movie made, let alone trying to convince the jugheads who actually have to sell it, who actually have to, like, raise the money and get it going, to convince them that they should let me do it in this kind of more expensive way. But a movie shot on film and projected in a movie theater is something you cannot get at home unless you're Quentin or Christopher Nolan or many of my other friends who have movie theaters in their home. Most people don't have a movie theater in their home. Most people cannot project film in their home. Most people are watching video. That's what you're getting.
Right.
That's okay. That's a great facsimile. I am the champion of video. I love VHS video. Like, I love video. Like, I think video is wonderful. I keep deep throating this mic.
You're totally fine. She's over there.
With her over here. Yeah.
There she is. Oh.
I just have. That's weird.
Yeah, it's she's new. She's new. We just got her a week ago, so she's actually co-interviewing right now. But like, she's a bit shy.
It's trapped in, like, in some kind of hell where you're just in that pose constantly.
It's like a Black Mirror.
Yeah, it's a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah. I guess going back to this, so I think I asked, so are you like on hiatus from filmmaking? Is there anything in the pipeline?
So, part of it is, and again, what is a film? What is a movie? For me, it's when I have something like, look, there's a lot of easier ways to make a living than making movies. Most filmmakers that I know, myself included, for the most part, live relatively modest lives, because we're independent filmmakers, and sometimes it means you have to do everything. Like, I have a friend Don Coscarelli, who's one of my oldest friends in the business, and I knew him before I was successful. He directed this movie Phantasm and Beastmaster and a bunch of other movies. Well, he's an independent guy. Like, this is a guy, he writes his scripts, he edits his movies, he's producing them himself, he's raising the money, he goes to AFM, has a room there, he sells territories around the world, which is usually people want to leave that up to somebody else. But this guy, like, not since, I know there's been other filmmakers who have done that, but not since like Russ Meyer have I had such a strong example of somebody who is completely his own thing. He's his own studio from beginning to end. It all begins and ends with him. And there is something that I really admire about that. You know, one of the things I love, Stanley Kubrick is my favorite filmmaker. One of the things I love about Kubrick is there came a point when he had the power that he stepped away from Hollywood and he moved away to get as far away as he could to an English-speaking country, at least, and to London, to England, and so that he could do his own thing separate from everybody else without being under the watchful gaze of everyone. When I made Rules of Attraction, I was given the most freedom I've ever had in my life. Lionsgate, the film that made it, they just made American Psycho. American Psycho was a big hit for them.
Yeah.
I had written a script for Rules of Attraction without owning the rights to the material. I wrote it because I had to write it. Like, I woke up one day and I was like, I see the movie in my head. I keep seeing the movie in my head. I lived it in some ways when I went to college, and you know, and I read the book when I was in school, and so it's a really important book to me. And I had a lot that I needed to get out that was connected to it, and you know, that I would use it as a way as a writer to channel. And so I sat down and I wrote a script. Based on, I didn't think anybody would ever get it made.
Is that called to write something on spec?
On spec,
is that
yeah,
the term?
on spec. Well, and which I don't advise anybody ever do.
You did it though. Yeah.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But it's a thankless way of living.
Sure.
If you're writing on spec, you have to be willing to make it on spec also. Like if you're a writer and you're writing on spec, God bless you if you sell your material. Like, good for you, dude. You know, if you're able to actually write something and sell it, that's fantastic. I've done it. It happens. Like Beowulf, I wrote it and I was going to make it, and then I ended up selling it. But in general, you know, I would only advise you write it because you're going to make it. Like, when I sit down to write something, I don't write it because I want to write something. I write it because I have to. I don't want to be a writer. I hate writing. Like, it sucks. You're alone. You have to like get your ideas on the page. The only reason I became a writer is because it's cheaper and easier than hiring somebody to do it for you. Like, you know, and the whole point of when you're an independent filmmaker in a movie is the art in being an independent filmmaker, and maybe it's true of also, you know, Ridley Scott, is remaining as much in control and as independent and as in control as possible for as long as possible until you have to give up control. And there's an art to that, like a balance that you find where there's a moment where you're delegating, you've taken on your business partners. Now that somebody else is connected to the project, the balloon either takes off or it doesn't. And so I'm very, very cautious about that. I write everything myself, or with my daughter, because she's the only person I trust to write with. Or I've had other, actually that's not true. I've written with Neil Gaiman, I've written with Quentin, and like I've written with other people. I love writing with other people, but my daughter, when you have a writing partner, it's largely based on trust.
Right.
You have this kind of trust relationship. You're sharing your mind. You're throwing out bad ideas all the time, and you have to be willing to do that. And then to talk through them and figure out, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea. What if we did this? Blah, 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 blah. And you have to be willing to have that kind of dynamic. And there is a trust-based thing. And really good writing teams, really good writing partners are people who trust each other.
Gotcha.
And believe in each other. And so,
I think back to a lot of films that I watched when I was a kid or younger, and I think
was this one of them? Was Rules of Attraction one of them? No.
Rules of the I think it came out in 2002.
2002,
and
yeah,
I was
a palindromic year.
I'm 35 now, so I must have been 12 or something when it came out. So I don't know. I think I watched it when I was 15, 15, 16 or something. So a few years after it.
It was probably like forbidden fruit back then. Like now it must be kind of modest in some ways.
I mean, I feel like it's a dark film, and
well, it's dark because it's cautionary and not cautionary for what people think. The movie is actually based on, I think the book is actually based on a movie. I think Brett wrote the book based on the Jean Renoir film La Règle du Jeu, which is the rules of the game. And it's a famous French film that was made by Jean Renoir, who was easily one of the greatest French filmmakers, and it is now considered by some to be, and I think I'm probably one of them, to be the greatest French film ever made. And it's essentially Rules of Attraction. It's a bunch of rich people in a house. In fact, I think the movie was re-envisioned by Robert Altman with the movie Gosford Park. And I don't know if you saw that film either, but Rules of the Game, it's everybody's away on, like for the weekend. And at the time the Rules of the Game was made, which was, in France just prior to World War II, there was this kind of energy happening in the background. And as that was occurring, there was a lot of luxurious debauchery occurring. Gender identity issues that were happening in Weimar during the Weimar period. There was, it was this time when champagne comedies were popular. And champagne comedies were comedies that were made about rich people, because when you're going to the movies, you want to escape your life back then, and so people would go to the movies and they would see a movie about rich people, and they're drinking champagne and they're clinking glasses and they're having sexcapades. They're running in and out of doors and sleeping with, or presumably sleeping with each other. It's always implied, and running back and forth, and there's all this kind of bad behavior. And the analogy would be to, movies like American Pie or, movies like that, which are super popular films. Like those before, before the abject collapse of the motion picture industry, or the transformation of it into something else. Those were super, super popular films that would come out, Road Trip. You could probably start going through the list of them, beginning with like Porky's, which was, I think that must have been like in the 80s, Canadian film made by Bob Clark.
Like the teen sex comedies.
Yeah. Well, we talk about them all the time on Video Archives. We love them.
American Pie is one of my, it's almost somewhat embarrassing. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies.
It's everybody's favorite movie.
Yeah.
It's everybody's favorite movie.
Yeah.
It's a kind of movie. It's like,
but it would never get
it's
made.
Bad behavior.
Yeah.
We've covered a movie, and I'm not going to mention which one it is, but it's another Canadian sex comedy on Video Archives podcast. You'll never guess it. It's such a difficult to find film. It was made by some people we know, and up in Canada, and it was like maybe you could find it, but
sure.
It's a bad behavior comedy,
right.
And it is so like sleazy bad behavior.
Yeah.
You can't believe what you're watching, but it's fun. It's all done in this kind of fun way. It's like, I mean, to be honest, like a little bit like your show. It's a little fun. Like, it's like when I first tuned into your show,
I didn't know you watched it. But.
Oh yeah, no, it was. I mean, I kind of came in around that time of that guy who was like, you are all bitches, you are all whores. You tell me a book that you have read. Any book. Tell me a book. That Harry Potter is not a book. That is a series of books. You have not even read a book. You're such a fucking stupid bitch. Like that guy.
Okay. That might have been a different podcast, but I'm sure we've asked that. On the show.
Maybe it was somebody else.
I know. I think it's like a kid, Matan. Are you thinking?
Yeah, that guy. That guy. Was that your show?
It was a.
If it wasn't, I apologize.
No, it was.
That guy was hilarious.
Different podcast.
That guy was
we were going to have him on the show and basically do that same bit, but it didn't work out because he's kind of a troll. I was like,
it's a shtick.
Yeah,
he's got his shtick that he's figured out, and it's.
We've had those conversations.
So you can look at his shtick as either really super like degenerate and offensive, and you can look at it like that, or you can look at it like it's really funny. It's kind of almost so extreme and so elaborate and so over the top that it's ludicrous, and it makes it almost it diffuses any power that it has almost.
Yeah, but American Pie, definitely one of my favorite films. And I was also, thinking about films like Tropic Thunder or even The Rules of Attraction. Many of the actors that were involved, or just the people in general, directors, writers, whatever, involved with like American Pie or Tropic Thunder, they've come out, in interviews recently, and they say there's no way these films would ever be made today.
Well, Tropic Thunder was like
controversial.
Even in the moment, it was like, I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Well,
like
Robert Downey Jr.
Can't believe that they're doing it. They're pulling it off. And not only Robert Downey Jr., but they're basically making fun of Sean Penn in it because Simple Jack, the character Simple Jack, is based on the
Milk?
No, not Milk.
Not
Milk. The one he did. The one he did about the I can't remember the name of it, but where he went full retard.
He went full,
and that was that's the joke that was running around Hollywood.
Go full retard.
Yeah, he went full retard.
Sean Penn. I'm trying to remember. I am Sam.
I am Sam. Yes. Simple Jack. I am Sam. I am Sam.
Yes.
I am Sam.
Yep. You're gonna get canceled.
No, yes, because I'm making fun of Simple Jack.
Right.
Not I am Sam. No, actually, I was making fun of I am Sam. I think I just was directly making fun of I am Sam. But that was the whole point. Is like he went too far. Like, what were you doing? What were you thinking when you did that? And so because of that, the movie has like a really smart cultural commentary.
Right.
And then you have Tom Cruise in it playing Les Grossman, which is
great performance.
And if you think about it, Le Gros Mains. Le Gros Mains means the big hands.
Yes.
Les Grossman.
Yes.
In French, it's.
Well, you're Canadian, right?
Yeah.
But
that's not why I speak French.
You know French, yeah.
No, it's not why I'm a Canadian from Flin Flon, Manitoba, which is like up in.
Do they speak French there?
No, they speak Swampy Creek Cree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
It's a little First Nations thing up there.
I wanted to ask you before we get into, because one of my favorite films of mine is The Rules of Attraction. But before we get into that, I just had a couple other questions.
But before you do, before you do, the rules of the game, La Règle du Jeu.
Yes.
Okay, so the rules of the game. There were all these movies that were champagne comedies that were like American Pie, and Renoir comes along and he's like, "Fuck this shit." Fuck this shit. These people don't realize what's happening right now.
Yeah.
These people don't realize that they're living with all of this luxurious debauchery, and that there's an entire class of people who are dancing on the rim of a volcano and they don't even know it. And what he's talking about is the rise of Hitlerian fascism at that time. That here we are, we're just enjoying these like kind of champagne comedies and la ha ha, and like that's what we're talking about in movies, when really that luxurious debauchery is what's leading to the rise of the Übermensch in reaction. And so he makes the rules of the game basically to eviscerate those kinds of movies. And he goes out and he takes those characters and he makes the rules of attraction.
Interesting.
Audiences go to the film and they see it and they're like, what the hell is this? This is horrible. This is not funny. This is like making it like it's casting it's casting it into a mirror. It's like it's analyzing those films, and it's by doing that it's analyzing culture in that moment. Audiences were furious. They started ripping up the seats in theaters. They would throw ink blotters at the screen. The French distributor was like, sacré merde, what do we do? And so if the movie is too long, maybe that's it. And so we'll cut the things that we think are making them mad. That just made people more mad. They're burning down cinemas when that film came out.
Oh, wow.
So the film was taken. It had already been chopped up into pieces. It was destroyed, basically. It was considered a disaster and thrown away and forgotten. In fact, the movie was lost. And the elements were destroyed, and it was forgotten until I think it was like around 1986, and maybe I'm getting that date wrong. Like, it could have been 68, but I think it was 1986, where they discovered that the Nazis, because the film had been considered degenerate art, and that the Nazis were such good record keepers, they made sure to keep a pristine print of the movie in a vault. And because of that, because of the Nazi censorship, they were able to actually go back and find the movie and restore it to its original condition. And it is like one of the greatest resuscitations to ever occur in film history. And so I decided, I read Brett's book. I lived Brett's book in some ways. And afterwards, I was like, okay, this is rules of the game. This is not glorifying the events that are going on here. Brett is an observer. He's a passive observer inside of this world. I mean, when you think about the character Clay in Less Than Zero, Clay is Brett. There's just it's almost not even hidden. It's Brett. And he's literally malleable like clay, and he's the most passive character. He just kind of drifts into the situation as a cultural observer, not stopping, not protesting, but just observing, as he travels through this world of debauchery. And so Brett has long been a cultural cynic. He's been and accused of something else. Accused of glorifying, when he wrote American Psycho, for example, people thought that he was, lionizing this kind of behavior, this murderous behavior. He's obviously not. If you read it like a book, he's not. And if you read a movie like a book. And so when the time came to, make the movie, I remember telling Greg Shapiro, the producer of the film, my theories about rules of the game, about this book, and that they were kind of the same. And he said, well, yeah, but that was made during the rise of, during just before World War II. There's no war right now.
Yeah.
What really are you commenting on? And as we were shooting 9/11 happened. And while we were shooting The End of the World Party, I showed up on set one day, and I walked up to the craft service table, and I saw live on TV, because they had a TV at the craft service truck, and the entire crew was around it. And I was like, what's going on? And I looked at it and saw the plane crash into the building. I was like, oh, God, how am I going to keep shooting today? And that was literally the thing is, how do you keep shooting on 9/11? And
Yeah.
and the answer to that is you negotiate. First, you ask the studio to give you the day, and they wouldn't. Then you ask the unions to give you the day, and they won't. And then you ask the insurance company to give you the day, and they won't. Then you realize, I'm going to lose a day. And my budget was so tight on that film. It was such a low budget film. I mean, it was a very groovy, hip movie to be in for everybody in LA, but at the time, but we made that movie for nothing. We made that movie for very, very, very little money.
It was like 10 million or something.
It was made for
like
it was made for 4 million.
Oh, 4 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, I mean, I think they sold it. You make it for 4, you sell it for 10. You take it to the market and you sell it to those guys for more, and that way.
I see.
It's it's part of how movies are made.
And I mean, also, it had a pretty remarkable cast. So I mean, to make it for 4 mil with the cast that you did have.
So I'm Canadian, and because of that, everybody's constantly trying to get me to go to Canada. And look, I love my Canadian brethren and everything, but at that time, 2002. Pre-strike, at the time there was a strike in 2002, or there was about to be a strike, a union strike. Nobody was working, and I fought like hell to keep the movie in Los Angeles. In fact, the movie was budgeted at 10, and I cut it to 4 in order to be able to shoot it in Los Angeles. And because Lionsgate wouldn't give me the money, they were like, "Look, our foreign sales don't cover it." And so you need to figure out a way to make it for less. And then we figured out a way. I cut air conditioning. I cut everything. I cut my fee. I cut everything out of the movie.
You cut the air conditioning.
Yeah, you cut everything. I sat there. I said, "Oh, so what budget is covered?" Because I'm at the studio and I'm sitting at a table like this, well, a longer table, but with all the production guys and the executives, and they're basically saying your movie's over. Yeah. And I'm casting. I'm like location scouting. I'm like out there, hoping that the movie actually gets financed and made. We're spending money, but we're like starting to spend money, and they're basically telling me we're not going to make the movie. Can't make the movie at 10 million. And so I said, "Well, what will you make it at?" And they said, "We cannot make this movie for a dime more than 4." So I said, "Okay." So I took the budget and a red pen, and I sat there right in front of them. I said, "Let's do this right now." And they were like, "What?" And I said, "No, we're going to do this now." And I sat down and I just started cutting. European trip, cut it. Cut. I cut everything. I cut editor. I became the editor. Well, we ended up having an editor. Once they saw what I did, they started working with me more. It had a sobering effect on everybody at the table, and especially on Mike Pasternak, who was he was sitting to my left at that time. Mike Pasternak, who was the head of production. He's the guy who's actually in charge of making sure it comes in on budget and everything. And he sat there and watched me do it, and he realized my level of commitment. And also Nick Meyer, who was the head of foreign sales, he sat there at the table, and both of those guys became like my Praetorian Guard after that. When they saw how committed I was to making the movie, no matter what, that I was making this movie with or without you, I am making this movie, God damn it. And when they saw that, and they saw me cut like what I was cutting, and I was like, "I'll still make it. I'll figure out we'll do it like this." And we had an active discussion, like, this is how I'm going to do that. This is how I'm going to do that. Well, I'm cutting that, and this is how I'm going to do that. And we're going to consolidate those locations. I literally went through the whole thing. We're going to use Film California first, blah, 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 blah. Now, I'm Canadian. You would think it makes sense to go to Canada. And you're going to go to Canada. You're going to get 35% maybe if you shoot it telefilm. But then you've got to use all these Canadian actors in it. You can only have one American and one cameo, or maybe it's 2 Americans and a cameo. They've got some formula that's worked out. You can't bring your DP up there. My DP was a guy named Robert Brinkman. I would have had to fire his ass. I would have had to hire a Canadian DP. There's a lot of good Canadian DPs. But I was already, I had my team going. I was gearing up. I saw the movie in my head that I wanted to make. And I knew that, because I've experienced it before, when you fight a war, and movie making is like fighting a war. I've never been to war, but I have friends who are spec op guys, and they've told me deeply about their experiences. One, other people can't understand it if they haven't done it, and filmmaking is a little bit like that. But 2, if you're fighting a foreign war where you're fighting on foreign territory, you're going somewhere else, you are immediately at a disadvantage. Instantly. Sun Tzu, Art of War, like rule number 5. You cannot, you're better fighting a battle on home territory. Home territory, you're at home. You know your land. You're familiar with everything. You're fighting a different kind of war at that point. And so I live in Los Angeles. I started looking around. I produce as well. And so I started looking around. I knew that there was a program called Film California First that would supply a little bit of money, not quite as much as Canada, but they would kick in a little bit of money. And I knew that if I shot on California state or county property, that all of my services for that and all of my location fees would get paid for by the state, and all of my fire and police would get paid for by the state, and that they would get reimbursed. And so I looked at that and I was like, okay, let's go take a tour of everything that's within driving distance of the 3 mile zone, which is the center of Los Angeles, radially outward. And let's look at every single county and state property that's out there. And I found because a friend of mine was shooting a movie called Bubba Hotep. Mm-hmm. My friend Don Coscarelli, who I talked about earlier, was shooting an indie movie called Bubba Hotep. And he was shooting at Rancho Los Amigos in Downey, which is an old mental hospital and rehabilitation hospital that had become condemned. It was just a campus of 30 buildings, hospital buildings with gurneys left in them and radiology machines and hallways with rooms like a dorm and like they're hospital rooms, but we just painted everything. And I saw what my friend was doing and I was like, okay, oh my God, this is like a movie backlot. And if I come here, I'm getting all these services paid for. If I can, as much as I can shoot here, I'll shoot here. And then if I'm shooting on a freeway or a highway for driving scenes, that's also county and state property. When I did the big Burning Man thing, I shot that out in something reservoir out in the Coul de Monde of Los Angeles. There's this big reservoir out there, county and state property. And so, and we had fire in that one. And so all of our fire was paid for and everything. And so that became the ticket to keep the movie here. And I just, knowing that was the puzzle piece to make it happen, I played into, I just knew that, and I was right, that if I shot in Los Angeles, there would be benefit. Because one, I could scout the locations, because when you have no money, and I had no money, we had no money to location scout, you kind of have to do that yourself. And if you own a car, you can do it. You can drive around and scout your locations. And you can say, I'm going to shoot here, and I'm going to get that, and I'm going to negotiate that, and if I don't get that, I'll do that. And you work out your plan. And so I worked out my very, very complicated plan to basically cover those those same expenses that I would retrieve when I was in Canada, but shooting here. Now, I wouldn't have had that money to go scout around. I would have gone to Canada. I would have gone to British Columbia, where we were planning on shooting it, because they had just done Cruel Intentions in British Columbia, and it had a very Bret Easton Ellis look. It's almost like a sister film in some ways. Some people would say. I think it's Dangerous Liaisons done as a college movie. And so I looked at it and I was like, well, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to go up there. It's going to look like that movie. It's going to feel like that movie. It's going to be all the same sets and locations as that movie, because you go up there. I'm not a local of British Columbia. I don't know what the back alleys have in them. And I'm going to go up there. I'm going to rely on some location scout who I'm paying, $800 a day or whatever his rate is when actual pre-production starts. And suddenly I'm burning money doing something that I can do for free in Los Angeles. And so I was like, well, I've got to keep the movie here in Los Angeles. And also I knew that we were having, if I got the production going in time, that no one was working because we had this strike going on. There was an IATSE strike, I think is what it was. And so the studios had shut down production because we're uncertain. I just kept going. I was like, I believe that they're going to resolve the strike. And I just pushed forward into it and, kept going. And lo and behold, I think the strike didn't happen. And I had my choice of every single tech guy in Los Angeles. I had grips who were like, doing, the big movies, like kind of guys who would go nowadays, they would be doing in like Ant-Man or something. They would be the highest end guys. I had the best camera operator, the actual operator. You've got your DP, but then you've got a guy who operates. And I wanted Rules of Attraction to be shot with wheels, not with a fluid head. Like instead of like a fluid head, I wanted it to have very precise. What did my operator say? Intentional. You want to move with intent. And so I wanted to have very intentional movement, to my camera, because that's what Renoir, that was his shooting style. And so I wanted to, in some ways, hearken to my cinematic forefather, Jean Renoir, and kind of nod in his direction that this is sort of the modern version of that film. And so we got the movie going, and because we were shooting in Los Angeles, every actor at that time lived in Los Angeles. So suddenly it became the hip movie that was shooting when no other movie was shooting, and everybody wanted to be in it. Like James Franco was calling me up like, dude, I would meet with me, please. And like everybody is trying to be in it. Jessica Biel pulled a knife on me to try to, she said, what the fuck do I have to do? Yeah, she pulled a knife at dinner. And because I was like, I just don't know, you're so sweet. Like you're like seventh heaven. Like, I don't know if you can be me. And she's like, fuck you, man, I can be me. And she pulled a knife on me and held it to my neck.
And James Franco, he was for the Sean Bateman role, right?
He would have been. He was auditioning for Bateman at the time, and I met with him a whole bunch of times on it. And James is I liked him back then. I would have. Yeah. I really liked him, but there was something more subversive about James Van Der Beek. Franco was a little more on point to play Bateman. Yeah. Kind of expected, and James Van Der Beek up until then, he's
Dawson's Creek.
Dawson's Creek. He's just such a sweet guy.
It was a
I met with him at lunch, and he's got these dark glasses on, and we meet for the first time at some little restaurant on Ventura Boulevard, and we're talking for a little while, and I'm kind of uncertain at first. And we're in a little outdoor. It's like a little outdoor patio thing, and he takes off his sunglasses. And like it was in 1 second, I was like, okay, I get it.
He's the guy.
You're the one.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, I had to fight for him because nobody else wanted him. Like the studio didn't want him. And with apologies to James, they were thinking more, let's go on the nose with it. They were thinking, I mean, I don't know if they were fighting for James Franco or not, but like it's not like James Van Der Beek was the obvious choice in that moment. And the sales on the movie weren't really that high. I had, Tara Reid was actually the first person I had to play Lauren, to play the Shannon Sossman role.
Tara Reid for that role.
Believe it or not. And she's actually, if you read the book, she's actually much closer to the description in the book. And I had met with Tara, and this is almost kind of weird, but it's kind of like your show, and we're here in Isla Vista, and so maybe it's normal. I don't know. But I would have these very intimate conversations with these actresses as I met them, talking to them about because I wasn't looking for somebody to act. I wanted somebody to be. And, especially in the case of Lauren. And so I would, meet with them, and I would talk with them. And, one of the questions was, when and how did you lose your virginity? And I wonder if it's like, is this like talking out of school? Maybe I shouldn't talk out of about how, maybe these were private conversations. Well, let's just say that Tara Reid had a very entertaining and humorous sand-related losing of her virginity on a beach in Jersey.
Okay.
And Shannon Sossman couldn't tell me when it was because, well, one guy was too big and one guy was so small that she's not sure which.
So wait, you asked not just
I said it, didn't
not
I?
just Tara Reid.
Live.
Hey, it's good.
Live. By the way, I was terrified. My daughter, even though she told me, like,
This is a question I
this is a
ask
live
all
show.
my, people I work with too.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So it's totally. It's
So
totally,
you know that
it's copacetic. Totally
yeah,
copacetic.
you understand.
Yeah,
And
I get it.
You're like
Right, Damien?
the child who was raised on my work.
There you go.
And you've continued my work.
I have, yes. What's that word?
I mean,
the
like
legacy. I've continued the legacy.
I hope I haven't like embarrassed Shannon or her family in any kind of terrible way, because I think that she is one of the most special, magnificent actresses that I've ever
she was
been
great in the film.
fortunate enough to work with. And basically what happened was, and this is actually also, but you know what? Burn, Babylon, burn, right?
Okay.
Tara Reid was supposed to be in the part, but then she was at some nightclub in Jersey with her publicist.
Right.
And like they were leaving some nightclub and everybody was like, shit talking her or whatever. She's Tara Reid, right?
Right.
The American Pie girl. And so everybody's like saying whatever, and she and her publicist, and I can't remember her publicist's name, I shouldn't disparage, especially a publicist. They're coming out of the club and they get in their car and they turn around. It's like a convertible. And they're like, "Fuck you!" to the people who are in line, and they hit the gas and they crash.
Oh boy, it's probably a TMZ report on this.
Or maybe it was in reverse and they crashed into the place. Like it was some horrible thing, and it was like a disaster.
Sure.
And Tara Reid fled the country. She basically was not in the car all of a sudden.
Okay.
And like was out of the country, and it was like this vanished thing.
So wait, were you gonna cast?
And she was like, "Listen, I can't be in your movie right now, but don't worry, we're going to win Academy Awards in the future." And I'm like, "Okay, right, alrighty." But she canceled on me while I was on a location scout.
Okay.
Like I'm on this location scout. I get on the phone with her, and she's telling me this devastating information. And in my mind, I know that the movie just fell apart. And the very next call, because her agent then called the studio, was, "Your movie just fell apart." And I'm sitting in a van. This is the second time it's fallen apart, or third.
Wait, because of Tara Reid, or
because Tara Reid. Tara Reid dropped out of the movie. That's it. You don't have a movie. And so we're driving around. I've got like a DP and production designers and drivers, and I've got a bunch of people in a white van, and I'm like, frick, what am I gonna do? And people shit talk agents all the time, but I'm going to tell a story about agents really coming to the rescue, because that's actually what happened. And I'm sure that over my life I've probably disparaged CAA quite a few times. They were once my agency, but the fact of the matter is, and I can't remember the agent's name, but somebody basically became the champion of the film. I think it was Josh Lieberman. I think it was somebody in their casting department. One of the people who's now probably one of the heads of casting was an American Psycho fan, was like constantly telling me about how he kept like an Uzi in his gym locker and things like that. Like, like a person who really loves the world of Bret Easton Ellis. Okay, that guy, I called that guy up. And because the studio told me the movie's falling apart. I called him up and I said, "You have to find me somebody now. You have to find me somebody better than Tara Reid, or as good as or better than Tara Reid now, like today.
Right.
I need it now. Like I need to have that actress in the film today. Please, what can you do?" And so he was like, he started reading me like, "Well, it's this person. No, that's not going to work." And no, they already said no to all those people. And then he said, "Well, what about Shannon Sossaman?" And she had just done, what was the movie? Like 40 Days, 40 Nights. Is that what the film was? And then Knight's Tale. And so she was like Shannon was a DJ. Like she was like a really hip DJ who was doing like Nike commercials and stuff, like a DJ model, and like not an actress. And somebody saw her like DJing and was like, "You should be an actress." And they put her into that movie with Heath Ledger, who is a super swell guy. And she put them in that movie with him. And, they made this great romantic comedy, really good little romantic comedy. I don't know that, I know that she had a really good connection with Heath, but I don't know that the movie was a satisfying experience for her. Then she did the Knight's Tale, We Will Rock You, the musical medieval knight jousting movie.
Yeah, which she was a great fit for the film.
The movie is absolutely audacious, and I actually want to go back and watch it again. I thought it was like ludicrous and ridiculous when I saw it, after I had already cast her. But she is magnificent in the movie, and actually, he's also very good. He's Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger? Yeah. Is that no? Is it Josh Hartnett? I can't remember who the actor is in it. Doesn't matter.
In 40 Days.
Yeah, no. In it's. I think I'm now transposing the actors from both films.
Wait.
Doesn't matter. So I. Really doesn't matter.
So you ended up casting Shannon Sossman.
So basically, I called them up. They called up her. They sent a messenger with the script to her house. I continued looking at a couple more locations, and then I had them drop me off at her house after she read the script. This is 2 hours later. We dropped off. Everybody went to lunch. And I, basically went and I sat with Shannon and I talked her into making the movie because I called up the studio and they were like, well, I don't know. It's an unknown quantity, but I think we can make the numbers work. We'll call her. And this one guy, Nick Meyer, this foreign sales guy who was at Lionsgate at the time, and I don't think he's there anymore. He moved on to other pastures. He's probably now running Paramount or Warner Brothers or something. Nick basically fudged the numbers on our behalf. There were a lot of people who, this movie had no right to get made. And at every juncture, everything that should have stopped it, that could have stopped it, that should have stopped it, didn't stop it. And it just kept happening like that. The movie shut down constantly. The movie shut down every other day. And every other day, it got going again because we had to make the movie, wanted to make the movie. So I went and I met with Shannon, and I basically just sat with her, and I started talking with her about college and life and virginity and the permanence of relationships and the ethereal quality of relationships. We talked about life. We talked about dead friends. We talked about deep stuff. We got really into it really fast. We had an immediate connection, an immediate platonic working relationship connection. She got the material in a way, and she literally told me in that moment, I've done these 2 movies. They're big films, and they were both really fun to do, and it's good. But I'm not sure about this whole acting thing. I don't know about that. I don't really get it. I'm not connecting with anything. And I sat down and I basically told her what we would do, and I tried to stick to that promise as we went forward. But largely what I discovered while making the movie was I had cast all these TV actors, these really skilled, practiced TV actors, with each of them with hundreds of hours of television behind them. Jessica Biel had been working since she was a child, and James Van Der Beek had, was a pro, complete and total pro.
Wait, had you cast them before?
Yeah. I think
Tara Reid fall out, and then
I think Tara Reid fell out right when I was location scouting, if I'm correct. I might have Tara Reid may have fallen out. I may have cast Shannon, and then James Van Der Beek may have come shortly after that. I think if I have that correctly.
Okay.
Because I remember Shannon, the moment I cast her, we became thick as thieves. We were partners making the movie, basically. And she came to every casting session I did. She would come and sit in casting with me, and sometimes she would read with the talent. Yeah. Sometimes she would just watch. I would listen to her opinion. She helped me cast the movie. She helped me and Rick Montgomery, my casting director at that time, who, he did Green Book. He did the Farrelly Brothers movie. He's one of the best casting directors in existence. And he like in those days we would cast things. We would actually, there was this whole ecosystem of young actors come to Hollywood. They're working as waiters. They're doing commercials. They're doing the occasional TV appearance. They're working, they're doing stuff, they're kind of getting by, and they're auditioning every day, and they're doing acting class. And so there's this community of actors. They all know each other. They're showing up at auditions together. They're fighting for the same roles. Like, James Vanderbeek is showing up, at the same time as James Franco. They kind of, there's this energy that was happening. Everybody would come in and you would sit in the room and you would actually do readings. You're doing readings. They have the sides and they read the script, and you're auditioning people, and you're like looking like you're creating a bouillabaisse of some kind, and you're using flavors to make it in spices, and you don't want to overspice something, and you want the balances to be right. And so to have a casting director as seasoned as Rick Montgomery and as and he had such a good eye at that time, and then for the movie to be one of the only films that was kind of pushing forward against all odds, and that it was this kind of hip movie, like I think James Franco, the reason he didn't do I think he actually dropped out before I dropped out on him, but because I think he was playing me is what happened. I think he was holding out for Spider-Man, and I think he wanted to be Spider-Man. Actually, I think that was the original thing. Is he thought he'd played James Dean. He thought he was going to be Spider-Man next.
Then he got the supporting role, and
he ended up getting the supporting role, which in a studio film, shooting a big studio movie with, I think it was Sam Raimi, making that movie. That's a great move to make. That's a good career move, but. I heard him on Howard Stern talk about it, and he was basically like, look, I was trying to choose. I was choosing between this, Spider-Man, or the cool little indie movie, and that was Rules of Attraction. And so, it was, casting is like you want everybody to kind of vibe in together. And in doing it, we ended up with, because these young actors like Jessica and James and Ian Somerhalder, and all of them had so much television behind them. They were so experienced. They know how to find their light. They know how to move within the frame. They know all of the, they're used to hitting their mark, and it turns out they're like robots. Like, you could tell Jessica Biel, hey, Jessica, as you come in, you come in, say your line when you reach this point, and then say the rest of it when you get here. And you do this thing when you lift your eyebrow when you get here. We'll do that here instead, and do it on that line instead. And you give her some kind of complicated, okay, Roger. And next thing you know, she's doing it like on command. And so with somebody like her, the trick is to break her. And it turned out that she had never been given freedom. She'd never had, somebody say, you go ahead and do what you do. I'll capture you doing it. And I want you to be. And so I'd have to wear her down a little, like take after take after take after take, multiple takes. But she jumped on really quickly, and she came to me afterwards, and she was like, Roger, you don't understand. I'm used to people saying, you hit this mark and you turn this way and you say this line exactly like this, and then you turn this way and then you move to that mark and then you say that line. And if you don't hit that exactly right, that's it. And so she was just really good at taking their direction. And I came along and I'm like, we're going to play. We're going to make discoveries. And so we had some, some crazy days like with them. Shannon, on the other hand, was not a practice actress. She was a natural talent.
Yeah, I read online that by take 3, she would
burn out. So you'd learn that she would give you truth immediately, which is what you look for when you're a filmmaker. She would give you truth right away, and sometimes contradictory truth. You think you want something, and then the actor is incapable of doing it because it's not true to them. And then suddenly they do something that's like magic that you didn't plan on, because they dug deep or they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know it was going to happen. It just happened. And so I think when you're a filmmaker, what you're looking for is accidents, spontaneity, the feeling of spontaneity. And you're trying to gather up all of these spontaneous moments and hold them together so that it feels like you're on this kind of ride, this sort of cinematic. I mean, Rules of Attraction is a chamber piece. It's people in rooms talking.
Right.
That's all it is. And the challenge is to turn that into something more, to turn it into a kind of visceral ride that you go on where you ask yourself afterwards, what just happened to me? And to do that, you kind of have to be that while making it. You have to be willing to change your plan. Like I'm a big believer in, I plan everything to detail. The reason I made Rules of Attraction literally is because there was one scene in the book where, and it's a kind of macabre moment, so maybe it doesn't sound funny, but the girl discovers a dead body and she screams when she just has this she just flips out and she loses her mind and she starts screaming and like a chicken running around, bouncing into things, runs across campus. And I think one of the characters, and maybe it's even Clay, somebody's coming home and they see the crazy girl running across campus screaming, and he's like, what's going on with her? And when I read that, I laughed because the way Brett writes it, it's really funny because it's so absurd. It's so macabre. It's so absurd. It's so dark. And it's the opposite of what's happening. And this horrible thing has happened, but nobody else knows except for this one girl. And I was like, okay, I had a friend commit suicide. It had affected me really, really deeply. It still affects me really deeply. And so that scene was really important to me. And part of it was this moment as written, the discovery of the body and the hilarity of it. Okay, so we're making an independent movie. It's a low budget film. We have no money. We have to do so much every day. Mm-hmm. Like we had I think a 24-day shooting schedule, which is really tight for a movie like this. And so we've got to really blast it out. So we're jamming everything in, like just, next. It's like an assembly line. And I had an amazing, again, another Praetorian Guard, this guy, Jeremiah Samuels, who was my line producer. He was the producer that the studio made me hire to make sure that I would stay in line, like that I wouldn't be too punk rock. Okay, he drank my poison Kool-Aid day one. And he built me a machine that, like a production machine that ran against all odds. Like 9/11 happened. There were airplanes slamming into buildings. They shut down air travel. We were shooting with James Van Der Beek at that time, where he would fly to North Carolina, shoot an episode of Dawson's Creek, or and then that night get back on the plane and fly back to us. Then we would shoot him out, and then we would throw him on an airplane early in the morning, and he would fly back. And that was how we were making the movie. 9/11 happened. Thank God he was with us. Yeah, he was with us. Everything shut down. It was actually, I don't want to say it was good for us, but there was a benefit to having James with us. For the rest. He didn't have to go back anywhere. There was no way for him to go back anymore. And so, it just happens that way. So I had this scene in my head that I wanted to shoot. And I had been shooting all day. I had been shooting, the hospital scene with Paul Williams. I had been shooting all this stuff. I still had to shoot that. And I was shooting all this other stuff, and I still had to shoot that scene. And like Paul Williams, he's older than me, and he's tired. And we're now 3 a.m, and I'm here with Shannon Sossman, and I bring her into the room, and I just shot the suicide sequence. And so I have the actress who played Teresa Wayman, the actress who played the food service girl. Mary, the girl in the bathtub, the suicide girl. She's actually in the band Warpaint. She was actually Shannon Sossman's real life roommate. And when I went and met with Shannon, she actually asked me, "Hey, what if I was thinking my friend, my roommate, could play the suicide girl." And I was like, at that point I would have told her anything. You can have anything. Like, what more do you want? I was like, absolutely. And I went and I looked, and that picture of her in the movie that's taped onto the wall of her and her friend, that's like their real picture that was taped on the wall above her bed, just like that in real life. And so by casting the two of them, it created this sort of weird dynamic. And then because she wasn't an actress, what I did was I cast her as an extra, and I used her as an extra throughout the entire shooting of the movie, standing in the background.
Yeah.
And so that when the moment came where, when the moment came where suddenly she's the main actress of the movie, that you're complicit as the audience in ignoring her as much as James Van Der Beek's character or as anybody else. Yeah. She's as invisible as any of the extras in our life, any of the people in the background who you never interact with. But you know what? They have full lives. And so I had cast her roommate. I had shot her scene. I had, which in itself it's a big scene to shoot in a day. And I know I've got to get to that hospital. I've got to shoot the scene with Paul Williams. Okay, I've got to do the reveal where they discover the body. I get Shannon Sossman. She's in her trailer. I bring her out, take her in. I say, okay, Teresa's still in the tub. Just stay in the tub because we're just going to start rolling right away. I bring Shannon in. I show her the dead body in the tub, her friend, who's laying naked in this tub full of blood. And she says, I can't scream, Roger. I can't do it. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't scream? She's like, well, it's not scary. She looks so beautiful. She looks like a porcelain doll floating in the water there. And so I'm like, well, shit. And at this point I knew I can't force her to do anything. It won't be real. And what was meant to be something very simple and a very quick thing to shoot, a single angle, a single shot, she comes into the room, and then we're going to shoot the other stuff later, running around campus. She's like, I can't do it. And so knowing this and knowing Shannon and knowing the journey that she was on, and because she really was a collaborating partner on this movie, that she was like, as much a producer as anybody else as far as I'm concerned, we decided we'll figure it out. And so instead what we did was we would go into a room, and she's meant to be crying in the scene before. She's meant to have just broken up with, she's like a boy. She's crying. And so we went into an adjacent room and we started talking. And I told the camera, everybody get ready to roll. And so we're going to go handheld because we don't know what's going to happen. And so I told Shannon, and we started talking, and we talked and we talked and we talked and we talked about really intimate stuff, actually that I can't talk about here because it's beyond. And we would get to the point where both of us were crying. Actually, we're both in tears, and I would get on the walkie-talkie and I would say, "Okay, roll camera," and they would start rolling. And then while crying, I would walk her in and push her in through the door, and then just do whatever it is you're going to do. And she would smoke a cigarette, and she would like pace, and she did a couple of things. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she grabs the body and she pulls it out of the tub. Teresa, who was in the tub, she wasn't thinking I'm, going to get out of the tub. She's naked down there. Like, she's like not planning on, there's no pasties on her or anything like that. She was down there. She had no makeup even from, below water level. And so she pulls her out of the tub, which I couldn't have planned for. I didn't plan for. And she drags this body out and just kind of holds her and starts crying. And I was like, maybe it's just because like I'm a filmmaker in the moment and I'm connected to it. Maybe it's because I was already in tears, but I was freaking blown away. That was like, because I couldn't do what I wanted to do, we found something that was better, that was a kind of discovery. And I search for this all the time. One of my very, very favorite movies is Sid and Nancy by Alex Cox. And it's the story of Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, the Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols. And it's a punk rock love story. And the movie was made so close to the events that occurred, that happened, which was basically, do I want to give away the ending? Well, actually, why not? It really happened, and it's public knowledge. Nancy dies, and dies probably of an overdose, maybe even because of the junkie that the dealer who came, because she was a really volatile person. Anyhow, there was this actual ending to the life that everybody knew about. And the movie was made very, very close to these events happening. And then while making the movie, Gary Oldman and Chloe Webb, I think is who it is, they discovered a truth greater than what happened. They're making a biopic, but they discovered while making it, because they became the characters, and so they went on their own journey. And that journey is truth. That's a true journey they went on. They found truth. It may not have been the actual events as they occurred, because they turned it into a much more Shakespearean conclusion, the ending of that movie. But they found truth while doing it. And so it's okay if something doesn't make sense in a movie. It's okay if it's not how it really happened. It's okay if it's not like reality. It just has to be interesting. In a movie, sure. It just has to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, so the Rules of Attraction, the movie that we're talking about right now, one of my favorite films, and I've probably seen it a couple dozen times. And
thank you.
And what I love about it, what I love about your film, is that it kind of so perfectly captured what college was actually like. Because, for me, at least when I went to college, it wasn't this optimistic, feel-good Disney movie. It was like college was kind of dark, being disillusioned with life and school, shitty teachers.
You're in a weird place in life. That's what, there were several things about the movie thematically that I recognized while making it. And one of them was that these are kind of the best years, and there's a lot of bad behavior and fun stuff and bonding with friends and parties and blah, 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 blah. But this is also one of the most terrifying times in life. You're transforming. You're like coming out of a chrysalis almost. And all doors are open to you. You can go in and you're almost afraid to go through a doorway, because once you've chosen that doorway, other doors close. And so there's this strange strange dynamic about that time of life, which is kind of epic in some ways, because you're making these crazy, large, broad sweep occurrences that are becoming, the foundation of who you are,
right.
And which is terrifying. It's terrifying.
Well, that and I guess the partying is kind of a big component of, at least a component of the film. But going out on the weekends here in Santa Barbara, it wasn't like...
Yeah, we had almost no class. I was my whole thing in the movie was we're going to tell the story of college through parties, as opposed through the classroom.
Yes.
There won't be any classroom hijinks.
Except
the one class they go to is the tutorial is closed. The only teacher we see is just this lecherous guy who's not even teaching a class, just hooking up with a student in his office. I got really criticized actually when the movie came out
for that, or
well, the argument that was made by critics, I was like the darling film leading up, like Entertainment Weekly, the magazine.
Yeah.
There were magazines back then. Entertainment Weekly was like the hot, or EW or whatever the name of it was. Oh, this is like the hot new film coming out. And then the movie came out and they were like, 9/11 had happened. Irony was dead. I think they said that on Time, another magazine at the time. Irony is dead. It's over. Self-reflection is over. And immediately the critics of this country, they just, nobody wanted it. It's like, what? And in fact, it got treated largely the same way as the rules of the game did. People didn't get it. It, 5 years later, a year before, something like that, it would have been like a different kind of connection with the audience. But I did not have the critical support on the film. And the largest argument was, this is not what college is like at all. This is a lecherous man's view of what college is like, what he wishes college was like, or something like that, which completely depressed me. It actually sent me into a depression because I was like, they completely missed it.
Yeah.
Like they completely didn't get it. Like they are actually criticizing me for the same things that they criticize Brett for. Like they think that it's one thing when it's not.
Yeah.
It's what Renoir was doing. You're announcing to everybody, hey fuckers, something's happening, and you're not paying attention. You're living this debaucherous life of luxurious abandon, and you're not focused on what's happening. And maybe I mentioned this already, but Greg Shapiro, the producer, said, well, Roger, there's, no war. There's no World War II happening. And then 9/11 happened, and suddenly everything changed. And in a way, it's exactly I'm kind of grateful for that. It's almost better that the movie didn't work initially. It took 5 years before anybody would accept the film domestically. I have to say, in Japan, in Korea, in France, in England, where I had normally been England was that's Tarantino country. You go to England, and when I remember when Killing Zoe opened in England, I was kind of persona non grata in Tarantino land. And the first movie came out, and I remember reading the reviews for it. Killing Zoe came out, and I was on set on another project, and I'm reading over lunch, I'm reading the reviews, and it sounds like I cry a lot the way I'm describing it, but maybe I do. I was shaken to tears. Those British critics, those guys know how to write. They turn the knife when they get you. And so I had really, 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 really bad reviews. I didn't want to go back to England. I was like, I can't go back there. And then we got accepted to the London Film Festival, screened the movie. We had 3 people pass out. We had EMTs come to the theater, like paramedics, taking people out of the theater on stretchers in the middle of the movie while the movie's screening. And I remember people
because they were so distraught.
Well, in England, I thought it was people are just passing out. Like the suicide sequence is what did it.
Sure,
people were and what happened was, it turns out in Leicester Square in London, when people go to the movies, sometimes they take drugs when they go. They're high.
Probably
in the film, and we had a lot of high people, I think, in that theater.
Yeah.
And so there were paramedics taking people out of there left and right. And I turned to the British distributor of the film, who I think was Mel Gibson's company. I think it was Icon. I turned to the woman who was in charge, and I was like, go find a video camera. We have to interview these people who are passing out, and we have to interview the EMTs for the commercials. And she looked at me like, there's something wrong with you. I'm not going to do that, is I think what she told me. And
yeah, that would have been a good trailer. It's like all these.
It's like those trailers when people exit a Broadway show, I love cats, or whatever. It's like,
gotta include
oh my God, I passed out. I had a psychotropic experience. I thought that would make a good commercial for the movie.
Well, the critics, I think they're wrong, but
they loved it in Europe. In Europe, I went to Europe, and the British critics, it was the opposite. I went to the press junket thinking oh God, here it comes. And it was I don't know. It's I could cry for another reason. Sure. They embraced the movie. They loved the film. They understood it 100%. And that turned out to be the case all around the world, except for the United States. And that was because in that moment, right after 9/11, nobody wanted to have a mirror put up to them. Nobody wanted that in that moment. So to the United States, it was a mirror. To everybody else in the world, it was a window. And they were fine looking through that window to see what it was, to see all the bad behavior. And then the French, they got it. Like, they understood what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to the college experience component, it's crazy to me, though, that people were saying that, oh, that's not what college is like. But at least from my own personal experience,
I read it when I was in college.
Yeah.
As I was reading it, as I'm reading the page, I'm looking up and I'm seeing the characters around me. And I'm identifying with, some of the characters, probably all of the characters in some capacity. Yeah. There's a little piece of, us especially when you make a movie, because you have to put yourself into every character, both good and evil. And you have to find the truth of that person within you and somehow get it onto screen.
But yeah, I never... there's this, at least when I was before I went off to college, there's this there's this optimism. It's going to be very Disney, but like when I went on going out to these college parties or whatever, going to college, it was like the violence, people getting into fights, alcohol, drugs, freshmen ODing. Oh, freshmen don't OD, but the sex. People just kind of being awful, and everyone being deeply dissatisfied when it came to dating, dealing with rejection, this sort of thing. And these were all themes that were just like kind of really masterfully explored in your film. And so I guess what I just really like about it so much is that it's like this is what college is. It's not this like kumbaya session. And there's a lot of like kind of, when you go off to college, there's a lot of dark components to it.
If you watch American Pie or Road Trip or any of those movies, there's nothing in the Rules of Attraction that isn't in one of those other movies. Yeah. It's just the way that I look at it, as opposed to, it's just how you look at things.
Right.
I think probably the first movie to me that like captured that sort of quality to me that I hadn't ever experienced before in a kind of youth-based film that took its subject matter as though it were great literature, was Risky Business, the Tom Cruise film.
Yeah.
It was a movie that was, it's a movie about a kid who like hires a bunch of hookers. I mean, it's like Weird Science is kind of almost the same movie in some ways. Like it's a kid who wants to get a bunch of hookers and like, I'm going to make money and blah, blah, blah. And they do this whole thing. And it is like kind of all that, but because Tangerine Dream does the music for the movie, because Ronaldo Villalobos was one of the greats as far as a DP, and he brings just an absolutely beautiful texture to it, because you have Tom Cruise, who was at that time, and actually he still is, one of the most committed young actors around, like somebody who was, I mean, you watch him in Taps, he's riveting. Tom Cruise is riveting in Taps. You watch him in The Outsiders, he's unbelievable. You can't stop him from doing flips. Like literally, he just does flips. He's an incredible, like magnetic performer, and then actor, and then and I think he's always been that way. I love Tom Cruise, but in Risky Business, he's fantastic. And the movie has this feeling of that you're watching literature, even though it's, you've got like a kind of Guido gangster guy show up at a certain point, and it's got all these kind of genre things in it. It has a kind of magical realism,
right?
That I love, and so I tried to bring a little bit of magical realism as well to Rules of Attraction. That well done, that a snowflake falling can be a tear.
Is that your favorite scene in the film? I think I read something online maybe that
I'm actually really happy how it turned out.
Yeah.
It was actually a really tough situation because, again, we had no money.
It was CGI.
Yeah, and we had no money to do CGI, and CGI was not the way it is now.
Right.
It was early. Like for compositing, it was okay, but doing any modeling or anything, and so we hired a guy who was a VFX guy, makeup artist, VFX guy, and he was going to he basically was going to do a snowflake for us. And man, we worked on that fucking snowflake the entirety of post.
Wow.
And I kept going back, and every time I looked at it, I was like, dude, it looks like a white cornflake falling out of the sky, rotating, and it does not look like a snowflake. Now, if you want to do like a field of snowflakes falling, that's easy.
Right.
You want to do one snowflake and your eye zeroes in on it. You have to like get that. Suddenly that snowflake is the star performer of the shot.
Was the tear also CGI, or
no,
was
the
that
tear,
like,
the tear was somebody off camera with a dropper who reached in and just put the dropper in at the right moment, and so that the tear would fall.
Okay.
And then we digitally erased the hand, and then add the snowflake. Okay, so we're working on this snowflake, and we're working on it, and I'm like, we're just not there. We need to go farther. It's rotating as it falls, like it's a spinning object, and I need it to tumble more, and it needs to have. And so, like, I was basically talking about puppeteering, is what I needed to do to it. And I had a very specific idea of what needed to be done. And he basically told me at a certain point, no more. I'm done. That is what you get for the money that you've paid me. And I said, but are you willing to put your name on that? And he said, that's as far as I'm willing to go with this. It's not going to get any better than that. And I said, well, it's not good enough. And so I fired the guy, and I said, we'll hire somebody else to do it. And he held on to the shot. He refused to give us back the negative that we needed. And
you had to reshoot it, or?
And so I had to use one of the takes. I had to use 2 takes that didn't work and digitally combine them together. There's actually 2 takes that are combined there.
Okay.
That I ended up finding a company called Pixel Magic that ended up, they were actually at the time working on my split screen, and they were doing dissolves for us.
Right.
And I went in there, and I basically, it was like a little factory place, and they were doing us a great deal because they wanted to work on a hip little movie, and they weren't making really any money off of us either. But they're making their money on, whatever big.
Wait, I want to hear about this guy who hijacked, who he kept the film.
He was also kind of a creepy guy because he was like this kind of valley dude who had long black hair and like a black funnily shaved beard, and he would wear those like snake eyes to set, and he had like a belt buckle with a hologram of like
like the contact,
like contacts of like lizard eyes, and he would bring them to set, or like vampire eyes, like white vampire eyes, and then he had this belt buckle that made you look down at it that was like, I can't remember what it was.
That's the snowflake guy. That's who you got to get if you want the...
Yeah, and so he would come to set, and some of the actresses were like, that guy, like, he keeps like kind of coming, he's giving me the creeps. And so I eventually also had to kind of keep him off set. And so... But so
you lost the actual take? Like he had
No, I lost
the footage?
I lost the actual camera negative, which is the negative that's rolling through the camera. Your original, that would be like... your original elements that you make everything else afterwards from.
He had that.
And he would not give it back.
Oh, man.
There was no way to get it back. We were fighting over it. And the producer basically, and we were on schedule, and the producer basically said, what do we do?
Never got back.
We never got it back. He still has it, as far as I know.
What's he up to?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
He still has it. He's working on it still.
I actually don't have, even though I probably kind of slagged him a little, I actually don't really have that much negative. It all worked out well in the end. It made me work a little harder.
Right.
I got the snowflake I wanted eventually because I had them build a 3D model, which is what I needed. I just didn't need a flame model that was just something that was painted that you just track through the scene. I needed something to tumble and fall as though it had weight and dimension. And, and so...
If he's out there watching this, we need that negative back. Yeah. We need to get it back. And so
there's other stuff that would be more interesting actually to obtain, to regurgitate back out if people were ever interested in it. Like I shot a TV version of the movie that could be played on TV. Like in those days, you had to, by contract, or maybe it's still like this, but by contract, I had to deliver a TV version.
So it was shot on video?
No, so I shot.
Or you just...
No. I shot on film. Yeah. I did additional takes. Like the whole rape sequence is completely different in the beginning. Yeah. It's a completely different scene. It's more implied. Actually,
I could see.
As I've grown older, I kind of would be fine with the TV version
if that was in. Okay.
And it was just like all the bad behavior taken out. We had little things like Kate Bosworth, who is, I love Kate Bosworth. She's wonderful. She's a great actress to work with. She's really game for anything. She's a lot of fun. She showed up on set again, this very experienced TV actress. She shows up. We're shooting a sex scene with her and James Van Der Beek, and I'm basically shooting them separately, kind of separately. I'm shooting her from above, just a close up on her face. Sort of like this, and then I'm shooting James kind of from underneath her with a little piece of her in the frame, just a little tiny piece of it, like looking up at him. That's the entirety of the scene for the most part. We're shooting it, and my DP leans over to me. He's like, and he's German. Oh, Roger, do you think there's any way we can maybe get her to take her top off? And I'm like, well, let's ask her. And so I take her aside and say, hey, Kate, we're trying to frame it like this, and we can kind of see the towel and everything, the top. And how would you feel about, we'll frame it out, but how would you feel about that? She's like, great, no problem. She, off goes the top right then. We don't have to clear the set or anything. She doesn't care.
Right.
And so we still clear the set. We're Jeremiah Samuels, my producer my on-set producer on the film. He's a totally pro guy. He does things right. We clear the set. We start shooting. We're shooting it topless. Film is 4:3, which is the dimensions of full frame.
That's the aspect ratio, right?
The aspect ratio of the full frame Academy aperture is 4:3. So when you're running 35 millimeter film through a camera, that's the frame that you're shooting. When you project, or sometimes when you go to video, you're projecting at 1:8:5:1, which is letterboxing. Like letterboxing
to 9, or is that it's different?
16:9 is a different container that was invented by some engineer at Philips who came up with a random calculation based on some kind of demonology or numerology or something, where now it will be 16:9. I mean, 4:3, if we're talking aspect ratios, which is like an old movie, and
that's what TVs were,
old
right?
black and white movie TVs
used to be
4:3 is a golden ratio. It's a golden section. It's
why did it change?
Well, it changed. That's a very good question. It largely changed because all movies used to be Academy aperture, squarish, 4:3. And then I think it was The Robe came along, and it was the first CinemaScope movie made. And
when was that?
1950 something.
Oh, okay.
Maybe late 40s. God, I'm probably completely massacring the history of this, but somebody out there will correct me. The movie comes out, CinemaScope. Okay, CinemaScope is a codec, effectively. It's a codec. We use codecs. A codec is a compression-decompression technology. You compress something, and then you compress it, and then you transport it, and then you decompress it. And so what a CinemaScope lens is you compress the image. You shoot with a lens that warps everything and squishes everything. And it takes the CinemaScope, which sometimes, like on a Quentin Tarantino movie like Hateful Eight, for example, that movie is shot CinemaScope with anamorphic lenses. And what it's doing to achieve that is it's taking the square 4:3, it's not really square, but the 4:3 Academy aperture frame, and then it's squishing a 2-3 1:1 film, or a 1.85 is spherical lenses. So it's not really anamorphic. It's not relying on compression, decompression. But what it's doing is it compresses the movie down. It makes everything stretched, like squished. Like sometimes on TV, you would see an old movie come on during the credits, and to squeeze the credits on, suddenly they would take off the decompression lens, which decompresses it. So basically, you compress the image when you shoot it. On the film, it's compressed. And then in the movie theater, there's another lens that decompresses it. And that's another CinemaScope lens. Well, all of that is CinemaScope. It's owned by CinemaScope. It's owned by whatever Big Five thing. And you have to license that technology. You've got to license those lenses from Panavision or whoever. And it was an actual technology. When one traces back the technology, it was actually invented by a French guy for Pathé Films, and actually a Romanian French guy. He was a porn guy, actually. He was a porn filmmaker who took over briefly Pathé Films and started making Abel Gantz's Napoleon, which is one of the most visually outstanding films of all time. He started making labs. He invented CinemaScope. He invented Technicolor. He like, this guy was on fire. He was a pornographer. And so, and it's actually kind of an interesting story because Charles Pathé thought, sorry, I really digress a lot, don't I? Charles Pathé thought that movies were like the hula hoop or something. It's like, which didn't even exist then, but he thought it was just a fad. It was just going to go away. And so he sold Pathé to the pornographer, who then built the company and turned it into like the biggest company in France, the biggest media company in France. Charles Pathé was still on the board of directors, and they used at the time, and this is during the World War II, the rise of World War II. You know, Nazis are taking over Germany. Things are going on everywhere. They use anti-pornography laws or decency laws, I think is what they were, in France at the time, to basically put him on trial for the gay pornography that he was doing, because he was was a homosexual and a gay pornographer.
Okay.
God, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
And he ends up, Charles Pathé realizes, I want to take the control of the company over again. And so he conducted a hostile takeover by having the guy jailed for a trial. The trial is delayed and held off for long enough while the guy's in jail. Charles Pathé takes over Pathé again and resumes control of the company now that that guy's in jail. Then the Nazis take control of France, and that guy, God, whose name is just on my tongue, gets sent to, I think, Dachau, and dies of typhus or typhoid fever or something, some horrible disease. And he dies in internment. And like that's cinema, man. Like that's how cutthroat and ruthless cinema is. Like people talk about Harvey Weinstein or, you know, like
Hollywood today,
the Skank brothers or anything like that, and they hold nothing to Charles Pathé. That guy is like one of the great like Titan villains of. Anyhow, I can't even remember where I was. Doesn't matter.
Well, we have some other things we can bring up.
Yeah, bring it up. I'll circle back. I'm
we're
sure.
Gonna pull up a couple things. So we'll come back to the rules of attraction, but I do want to segue here a little bit. So can you pull up the first Instagram image that we have?
Did I tell you? I think this is the
we'll come back.
Only the sorry about that. The only live show I've done.
Oh yeah?
Since the Academy Awards.
And that was in the 90s.
Yeah. This is the only live show I've ever done.
Really?
Since then, yeah.
Well, we are live. Hi, Mom.
Fun fact.
You should, you have your podcast that you do with Quentin Tarantino. You should do it live. I don't know. Do you guys edit
Yeah, we edit it. We edit it. We have a full production thing, and it's like a, we do research, and then we have a conversation, and it's kind of like we're trying to just do like a little blah 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 show where we're just talking.
Right.
But at the same time, we're trying to elevate that as far as we can by elevating the conversation about cinema, mostly to. Look, there's plenty of people out there who are amazing and like who know a lot about cinema and who talk about it. And the internet is full of, it has done nothing but supercharge film knowledge and everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in some ways, we've forgotten how to engage in friendly discourse and discussion and argument about the arts. You know, we've forgotten that it's okay to fight over something and then be friends afterwards and go do karaoke.
So you guys cut out all the arguing about.
Oh no! When we argue, listen. When Quentin's got a beef with me, he doesn't hide it.
Okay.
He comes right down and he says it. And there's certain things about things that, certain qualities I have that probably really rub him the wrong way, and that he really doesn't like, and he probably hates it when I say certain things, and like he thinks I'm super dour and grumpy, I think. And those are my words, not his, but that I'm kind of, like dour and grumpy about the industry and everything. And, in some ways I am. Like, it's not the industry that I knew growing up. I'm a film artist, like a motion picture, photochemical, mechanochemical filmmaker. It's what I like. If the project was right for it, like there are certain projects that are absolutely ideal. In fact, when we made Silent Hill, that's a good example, actually. It was right in the middle of, movies are being shot on video, movies are being shot on film. Christoph and I talked about it, and we were the director of the film and with the producer, Sammy, at the time, and we had a big dinner and we discussed it, and we all basically came to the conclusion, we realized in that moment that a lot of this movie takes place in the darkness, in what we actually called the darkness, which was this darkness that overcomes everything. And video loves dark. Video hates light. Like, video hates outdoor light. Video loves indoor dark. Like, you can shoot in darkness really easily with very little lighting. And so we realized, well, when the darkness happens, we're going to shoot on digital, and the rest of it we're going to shoot on film. And so when you're in the real world, when you're in Kansas, so to speak, it's all film. Even when you're in Silent Hill, I think it's largely film. But once that darkness falls, we're video all the way. It's digital. It's digital. And it creates a kind of ethic shift as we transfer from one kind of perception of reality to the other, which is what the film is thematically grappling with.
Cool. Oh, Damien, we have the Instagram thing. Why don't we do the pull up first the Oscar, the two Oscar ones. So pull up the first one. So that should be the second Instagram tab.
Oh my God.
So that's you and Quentin at the Academy Awards accepting the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay.
I had my very dear friend Renee was a hairdresser for movies and everything, and actually was Quentin's hairstylist as well at that time.
Great flow, by the way.
She, like, my hair never looked like that. It's like she just blew me out or something, and it was like, are you kidding me?
You gotta bring it back.
Yeah, and then I and
then
it's hard to pull it. The older you get, it's harder to pull off long hair. Yeah. It's hard. It gets harder.
Damien,
you start looking like that guy on set with wearing the eyes,
the reptile.
Yeah,
eyes
you don't want to be that guy. There came a point where the night of the Academy Awards after Pulp Fiction, my wife and I, we had our limo driver and we drove and we stopped at the beach. I cut my hair off and buried it in the sand and let the tides take it away. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. And then Damien, we have the other the first one. So this is you at the Video Archives.
That's me and Quentin at Video Archives.
Did
yes.
you surf?
Did you
used to surf?
So
you look like you used to surf.
I grew up at the beach. Okay. Grew up in Manhattan Beach and grew up in Brazil as well.
Okay.
And
Brazil?
Yeah.
You
In
speak
fact, I got
Portuguese?
Falo português, mais ou menos. I actually am leaving tomorrow to go to Brazil.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I leave
Very
tomorrow.
cool. But so what's the backstory here? So you and Quentin, you guys worked together.
To answer your question about surfing,
Yeah,
just
sure,
really
sure,
quickly,
sure, of
I
course.
grew up in a surfing community, and I was like a filmmaker, and I don't want to say I was a punk, but I was accepted by the punks. It was like the punks in my high school. They're like, yeah, it's the movie guy. And because I worked at this video store, like the guys from Red Cross, rented from the store, and they were like a punk band. And, Milo Ackerman of the Descendants, his brother, Theo, was like a friend of mine. So I grew up with like the Descendants, Black Flag, those guys went to Redondo High, which was right near us. And so I saw those guys every now and then. It's like the Circle Jerks, they were nearby. Like everybody, it was like there was this SoCal punk thing going on. I was not like punk. I was like probably exactly how I am now, but just young. And, but they were media literate. It's like the punks back then, they appreciated cinema, they appreciated movies. Like if there was a Venn diagram between us, like we connected. So they ended up being in all my movies when I was a kid, those kind of guys. And so I was making movies on Super 8, which is also film, and Regular 8 before that, and working at this, video store. And I had been working at another video store. My friend of mine's father started a video store called Video Outtakes in Redondo Beach. And so I was working there. And, Quentin basically came through the door one day, and I actually think he had been there before, but suddenly there's this guy who I don't know how to describe it other than it's like if you're both surfers. We weren't surfers. We lived in a surfing community. In fact, I worked on the script Lords of Dogtown. This is a good analogy to this. I worked on Lords of Dogtown, not just because I grew up in a beach community and during that time period, and used to, and I know that all the movies and all the Bones Brigade, skateboard films and stuff like that. Like because I worked in a video store, I knew all of that stuff. It was because a surf shop is exactly the same thing as a video store back then. It was like a shop that was doing what you love. Like if you were a young kid and you liked surfing, you went to, and you lived in Venice, you would go after school and hang out at Zephyr Surfboards. That's what you would do. You would go there and hang out and watch, Skip Englum shape surfboards and see how he's doing it. And oh wow, he's like, look how short that board is, and oh, he's glazing it now, and oh, look at the fiberglass, blah blah blah. And then you're around for the switch from clay wheels to polyurethane wheels, and that was like huge. Like the reason I never became a skateboarder, clay wheels. Like if I had had polyurethane wheels, I'd probably be skateboarding like Eric Stoltz does, and he's like a really freaking good skateboarder. And so. The store is like a place, and so right. Tony Alva ends up going there. Stacy Peralta ends up going there. Like all these guys who would eventually, they were just kids, young surfers or whatever, but they would eventually become the superstars of this this emerging industry, and that emerging industry was polyurethane wheels for skateboards. Okay, for us, we were in a video store. There was a guy named Lance who was like the video collector guy, who was hiring the kids to work there. You would go, even if you didn't work there, you would go there to the store, your local video store, and hang out. because they're putting a movie on. You're talking about movies. If you like movies and you don't live in Hollywood necessarily or Hollywood proper, you go to the closest thing to that. And so that was my entry point to working on the Lords of Dogtown script. Was this place was no different than the video store that I worked at. And the transition that was occurring for us was a transition from VHS videotapes to DVDs in that moment. That was a revolution occurring. And that happened right at a time when Quentin and I were just growing out of the video store, just going into wanting to become filmmakers. And so suddenly here we are, just like a couple of kids, but we know every movie. We've had access to the database. There was no algorithm back then to guide you. We had to know our customers, and our customers would come in through the door and, oh, they're on date night. So I've got to get them a date night movie. And, every customer has the same wants. They come in and they say, I want something that's new, that's good, that I haven't seen yet. And you're like, well, okay, well, first of all, if you haven't seen it yet, it's new to you. And I'll find you something good. And so because we were an indie store, like we didn't have like Blockbuster, a ton of titles of some new movie. We could get one or two or three of those. And then we would have to use our algorithm, which was me and Quentin and Jerry and Steve-O and the other guys, Roland. Roland is one of the best at it, to basically guide people into, what movie do you want to watch? What's a good movie to watch for you? And sometimes it's like I remember we had a porn section, and the porn section kept everything else going. It's like porn paid for silent films, porn paid for foreign titles. We were making so much money renting out porn tapes to, the families of Manhattan Beach and the people in Manhattan Beach. And so you get to know what people's tastes are in that as well. We had this one guy who was like some old military guy, I used to call him the Commodore, because he'd come in, some old Navy guy with a cane, and used to wear all of his hat with the patches and badges of, I was on the Indiana when it went down, stuff like that. He was like or the Indianapolis when it went down. And this guy came in and he was like, man, this tape, God, what was it? I want to make sure it's,
it was an adult.
This is going to sound terrible saying this in this day and age, but he's like, this tape, Vietnamese hookers. There's not one Vietnamese girl in it. They're all flat-faced ties.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was like, whoa. Like, holy cow. Like, I got to write that one down. That's a good one. That's a good piece of dialogue for some guy like that who's going to come in. And so, people would come in and you're like, you want a children's movie? Well, Russell, is our children's film expert, and he'll help you find what your child find whatever the best movie is for them. And this is what's new. And we've got Thundercats, and we've got this, and we've got that.
How long were you guys working there for?
Well, off and on.
You started
off and
before
on.
Quentin, right?
Like, I would say I was working in video stores from 1978, 1979. That sounds really like dating. That's crazy, actually, when I hear myself say that. Is that even possible? Yes, because I graduated high school in 1983, and it's amazing. I graduated high school in 1983. I'd been working at Video Outtakes before that since 1978, end of 1978 into 1979, maybe even a little longer than that. And so I had been working in it for a lot longer. Quentin was like a customer. He came wandering in. And I was like really annoyed by him at first, because he's like this really, like, you think you know everything, and then suddenly this gunslinger walks in and he's like, you think you're the fastest draw in town. And then suddenly Quentin walks in and he's like, he's got some weird shooting style, and so immediately there was this like, oh, this guy, and like he really bothered me. And the next thing I know, they hired him, and the next thing I know, I'm on shifts with him. And at first, I'm talking about this like this was probably like years that happened. It was probably like a day. It probably took a day for us to become thick as thieves, become like close friends, because suddenly he completely opened my eye and started introducing me to Filipino action films or blaxploitation movies. Those were not my thing growing up. I saw some of them every now and then. I saw Shaft and I saw Coffee growing up. I saw probably the big ones. But you start hanging out with Quentin, and he starts introducing you to the to the good shit. Like, oh, you like that? Oh, I'm going to take you into the back room and give you the good shit. Well, that's what it's like with Quentin. And so we started working together, and conversely, I was probably introducing him to films and movies and movies. Some of those movies that we've been revisiting actually on our show. So the conceit of getting back together was we actually, Quentin and I, because of the business, because of the trappings of the business, because of just because of how things are, we just, we had a cooling between us. We separated for a number of years, and we just didn't talk. And then I went on the Brixan Ellis podcast, and I was just talking freely, and he listens to that podcast, and I spoke very, very, I don't really have a governor. And I just spoke very freely and openly about my experience in life up to that point. And, Quentin's he's more than my friend. He's my brother. He's my brother from another mother. This is a guy who I've shared my brain with him. He's shared his brain with me. We've seen each other, over the years in good and bad situations. And we've been through the best together, and we've been through the worst together. And he picked up the phone. It was during the pandemic. He picked up the phone and he called me. He was like, enough. And he called me up, and we started talking, and we didn't talk about the business.
Right.
We didn't talk about global politics or whatever. We talked about movies. We just, and we hadn't really connected, in any kind of significant way, polite to each other, see each other, hey, how you doing? Give each other a hug whenever we would cross paths. But that was kind of it. Okay. We started talking again, and it was like, boom, dropping right back into, circa 1989 to 1992 or so.
Back in the video store.
Yeah, or even beyond that, 1984 probably to 1992. This kind of area where we did nothing but we would work together, we would talk movies all day. Okay, so we're working and we're doing our thing and we're renting tapes to you. But that's second to what we're doing. We're watching a movie right now, and we're having a very deep discussion about this film. And if you're a customer and you come in, we're going to help you and everything, and we're going to help you find whatever you need and everything like that. But you better be willing to engage in the movie discussion that we're having, because that's what we're doing. And so people would come in and hang out for hours. And it was like a
hangout spot.
A hangout spot. It was like a chat room, basically. It was like people would come in, and there was one guy, for example, who did not own a VCR, but he owned Krull, this movie Krull, which is like a sword and sorcery film that came out. Pretty good movie, actually. And he just loved Krull. He was like crazy for Krull, and he had bought the tape but didn't own a machine. And he would come in every day I worked and ask me to put Krull on so he could watch it. And I felt so bad for him, because we had like a little, couple of seats, like a movie theater you could sit in. And he would sit there, and once a week, he would come and he would watch Krull religiously. And so I ended up getting to know this movie Krull really well, way too well. And I started hating it at first. Okay, I
just watched the same movie over and over.
I watched Krull again not too long ago, and like it's shot on film. It's got these crazy, beautiful, like Xanadu style VFX that are all done with aerial image optical printers and strobing effects and crazy, beautiful psychedelic looking film. And it's a good sword and sorcery kind of sci-fi combo movie. It's great. I love it.
Krull with a K?
Krull. Krull. It came out around the time of Conan came out.
Like 70s?
Yeah, Conan. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Let's see, when did Conan come out? I don't want to get it wrong, but early 80s, early 80s. Directed by John Milius. And I didn't actually even appreciate Conan.
Yeah.
God, but you watch Conan now, and it's like, it's Robert E. Howard, so it's one of the greats. But you watch Conan now, and the movie is like it's incredible how good it is. It's James Earl Jones is so magnificent in that film. His speech about the difference between flesh and steel, and the power, how flesh has more power than steel, is some of the best delivery of dialogue of that decade for sure. It's such a good movie, and Schwarzenegger was such an unexpected emergence in that moment, coming out of Pumping Iron and that Elliot Gould movie that he had a bit part in, Hercules Unchained or whatever. He's in nothing, and or I guess Terminator. Yeah. And then suddenly he does it just took it to another level. Yeah. For people, and people who love that movie were crazy for that film, and it spawned a million imitators. Suddenly sword and sorcery movies. I mean, maybe it's because Dungeons and Dragons was still a thing back then, but suddenly all these films came out and you started getting, Beastmaster and Krull and blah, 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 blah. And there's a ton of them.
But
and that happened with Mad Max also, or the Road Warrior also. Road Warrior came out, and then suddenly there was at least 10 Italian Road Warriors made, because, and some of them are pretty good.
Is your, the podcast that you have with Quentin, is it, are you guys doing video? It's film.
This is how we do it.
Or is it just audio?
No. Well, sometimes. So what we do. Well, it's an audio podcast.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because it's very al fresco when we get together.
Right.
We're in Quentin's house basically, and Quentin wants to be comfortable when he makes it, and so he is he is not camera ready. Let's just put it like that.
Sure.
And I'm not camera ready right now, and I'm on camera. Sure. But so Quentin, and he wanted to be free to be able to just, really talk and get into it.
Right.
And not think about the video element. We are discussing how to introduce some video to it, and we have some aspects that we would like to do, special things mostly, that we'd like to introduce some video to. We've talked about the video component, and I'm open to ideas from our fan base who currently listens to us. But mostly, I'm letting Quentin drive the car. Mostly because it's his car, he owns the keys, and and he's driving it, and so we basically what we do is we get together once a week when he's in town. Let's say we get together on Tuesday or Monday or Sunday, whatever. We get together one day, and Quentin and I will sit down, and he will have a stack of movies. Like a DJ, he's kind of figured out sort of a mix of titles. Sometimes it's because he's going through something, he's having I'm doing an Aldo Ray retrospective. It's not even that, because he wouldn't need to do that. He'll find some actor or actress, and lately it's been in movies from the 30s or 40s that he'll start watching, and then he'll want to learn everything about their career. And so he starts learning everything about their career. So anyhow, I'll show up, and he's got a stack of films. we sit down and we start watching. I show up in noon or in the morning or noon usually, and we basically start powering through. And if we're lucky, we'll get 3 that work right away. But sometimes we don't, and we just have to keep going. So we'll watch a 4th movie or a 5th movie until we get it. And once we've seen it, we're like, okay, I can talk about this. This is interesting. There's something to say here. There's a reason to talk about this, and there's something exciting to talk about with it. Then, at that point, then we'll engage with it. And so then we separate for a couple of days, and I go home and I think about the movie, and he thinks about the movie, and then we get together. And in the meantime, Gala, who's not with us, her job is to source the movie like that Quentin has found. Mm-hmm. He's finding some obscure titles, and so he'll find something. We recently did a kind of a live television play performance, kind of a masterpiece theater type thing, and Quentin had been talking about it, and I'd been kind of hoping that he would show it because it's a really interesting topic, and the subject matter of the movie, and it's directed by an actor, and so we started started watching that. Okay, right away it was like, there's some stuff we can. This is there's really something we can talk about here. And so we get together, and then we just record the podcast. Gala has to then go find that title, though. And that might be a hard one to find. I mean, I think he stumped her 1 or 2 times, but she kind of goes out there, and she represents anybody who's just on the outside, like a listener. How are you going to find this? What is it going to cost you to find it? And she's trying to source things generally on VHS as well. And that's another thing. We're watching everything on VHS tapes. These tapes are the tapes that were from Video Archives. When Video Archives went out of business, Quentin bought the store. He bought all the VHS tapes, the shelves, some of the signage. Right. I bought all of the laser discs. I thought I was making a smart move in that moment. Mm. First of all, I couldn't afford the entire store. Right. Dennis, the guy who was selling it, he wanted too much money. I couldn't afford it in that moment. But I could afford the laser discs, and so he sold me the laser discs separately, and then Quentin picked up and bought the rest. Okay, then Quentin bought, because he likes VHS, he bought Eddie Brandt's when it went out of business. And Eddie Brandt's, Video Archives was great, but Video Archives was great because of us and Lance, and it was because of the people who worked there. Mm-hmm. It was actually kind of isolated from everything. Eddie Brandt's was ground zero in LA, and it had this insane collection, and just this amazing collection. So Quentin bought that also, and then he set up all the shelves in his house. He's got, he lives in William Friedkin's old house, and so he's got.
Do you have that photo of? I think it's with Roger and Quentin. Yeah. I think we have a photo.
Bring that up on screen.
Which one? It's just the photo. No. The photo, the more recent one
of the store.
It's
shelves, videotapes, maybe.
It's more modern. Do you have it, Damien?
And so these are literally the video boxes that I handled myself when I was working there, shuffling tapes back and forth. Literally, this is the it's got the stickers from the store. It's the videotapes from the store. Sometimes the tape hasn't been watched since it was at the store. And sometimes a customer stopped watching it when they got bored. And that's one of the great things about VHS tape, is that you can actually pick it up and see where they left off. It's it becomes a permanent record in that moment of where they stopped. It's like a keyframe of it.
Damien, it's not on the Instagram. I already have it pulled up. It's Roger and Quentin. There's all the VHS tapes behind them. There's a microphone.
I see Irma Ruiz has a question, and she's asking, where's the next Hollywood?
So this is
think
where you guys shoot this?
Yeah,
right
this
here?
is that's
Right
literally
here.
where we shoot.
Yeah.
That's where Quentin sits. I'm actually, I think, sitting where Gala sits right there because
Okay.
we had to squish into the shot
Got it.
together. Usually, I'm directly across from Quentin, across
Yeah.
this table he has.
Okay.
And that way we can like look and.
And these are all the.
I mean, this is like one tiny corner of a labyrinth
Right.
of rooms that are in his house that are like you just walk from room to room and it's.
Is that the TV too that was in the?
That is actually a PAL capable television and a PAL capable VCR, so we can watch foreign tapes when we have them. We have
we
a
can
few.
pull up these supers
Because with old video,
One sec.
the United States used what was called NTSC, which was a video standard, and in Europe they used what was called PAL,
Right.
and in France they used PAL CCAM, and which was even more, and which has a different amount of scan lines, and so they're incompatible systems.
I'll pull up these chats here really quick. We have Alejandro. He says Video Archives is one of the best. Roger Rules, big fan. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you.
We have Irma. Question, where's the next Hollywood? Do you think Hollywood will be the place much longer?
I don't know if it's the place now. Like, and part of it is there is this idea of Hollywood, but what is that? Like, if we really ask what is Hollywood, Hollywood is 5 large corporations.
Right.
In general, 5 large. They used to call it the Big Five, but now they've been, through consolidation and whatnot, it's transforming. But in general, it's still 5 corporations.
Sure.
And now they're streaming companies. Now it's Apple. Now it's Amazon. Suddenly it's these different, like, kind of library aggregators, and they just do everything a little differently. And so it's, there's this idea of what Hollywood is, but what that was a business ecosystem that meant that you could roll into town and live in Los Angeles and, be a working actor or be a non-working actor who's working, bussing tables at night and doing readings and auditions and, acting school and everything else in all of your spare time and, working around in this community of other non-working people, everybody trying to make it, and an actual system with a hit-driven model where we're gambling on ideas and making money and trying to put it all on screen and finding a balance between show and business, because that's really important. Like, if that falls out of balance, you end up with fucking European films. You end up with nothing but Bella Tarr, and it's like, I like Bella Tarr, but I don't want every movie to be a Bella Tarr movie. Like, it's like, I don't want to have everything be Tarkovsky. I would like, every now and then, American Pie. I want to see a comedy every now and then. There are 2 kinds of movies that, in general, feed us. One of them is escapist cinema or escapist movies, and those are the kind of movies that, life is hard. There's a lot of shit going on, and there's a lot of stuff happening, and every now and then you just need to tune out. And I know that people now use their phones to do this, and we're doing it constantly. You're doing it God, if I could just do it now just for a little while, just to just relax a little, and it's giving you this kind of false relaxation because it's activating alpha cycles in your brain because it's flying by at 120 cycles per second, 120 hertz, and just, your eyeballs are having to assimilate all that information, and it actually is having a kind of effect on you.
Sure.
Boy, I really like to go off topic, don't I?
Well,
but
yeah.
The basic idea is, no, there is no Hollywood anymore because there is no place to really go because that ecosystem doesn't actually exist. It's a false ecosystem now. It doesn't matter where you are. You may as well live in Toronto. There's as many movies being made in Toronto. You may as well be living in Atlanta, Georgia. There's as many movies being made in Atlanta, Georgia. There's, if you look at a state that has a film commission, look up their film commission, find out what their subsidy model is, and if it's like Tennessee or Atlanta or, Louisiana, especially certain cities in Louisiana and regions. In fact, Louisiana is freaking great. They have amazing subsidies in Louisiana. You go to Louisiana, they'll give you on your Louisiana spend 50% on the dollar. Okay, that is crazy. And that's not tax credits or some kind of rebate. Cash. They give you cash.
They'll give you money to make a
well,
movie.
they'll basically pay for half of everything. So if you're hiring people in Louisiana, they'll pay for half.
So if you're making a $10 million film, they'll give you $5 million?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
We have a Film California program, but, it gets gobbled up by Quentin. It gets gobbled up by, not that that's a bad thing. Like, we want Quentin making movies in Los Angeles. Like, that's where I like Quentin making movies. I want to see Los Angeles through his eyes. Like, that's money well spent as far as I'm concerned. I wish they would do more than that. But the truth is, there's a limited amount of money for some reason.
He's on his last film, right? Like, because isn't it the case?
What is a movie?
Yeah, I guess so.
What is a movie anymore? Like, I think that there's enough loopholes that that if he wanted to, and I'm not saying he does want to, because in the time that I've been with, the time that we've been in between shows, he's flirted with projects. He's written a script. He's decided not to make that script. Like, he's deciding what it is, and part of it is, you make a movie not just to make a movie. I mean, some people do. Some people just make a movie to make a movie. But you make a movie because you have to make a movie, because you have something to say. And you asked, am I on hiatus or whatever?
Right.
It's really hard to make a movie. And I really, if I want to make a movie, I want to make a movie right. I want to make a movie for the right reasons. I want it to be something I really, really want to make. And I have very few movies left in me, probably, just the way the industry is, though, just the way things are, where my career is. And I could probably make, small films and, little movies. And maybe there's a universe where, where I decide to do that. I have lots of friends who are these mumblecore filmmakers who make movies for nothing, and I really admire them because they're out there in the woods outside of the city state, doing their craft, and I really, really respect and admire those guys. Yeah, sure, I might do that, but I have to want to make that movie, partly because I'll lose money on it. I don't think I've ever made money making movies. I've had big paychecks before. I've gotten lucky at times. By chance, by working on some stuff that hit it big, have gotten some good jobs out of it. But in general, when I direct a movie, when I've made an independent film, I've gotten completely fucked over by my producers, by whoever. There's, when I made Rules of Attraction, in order to get James Van Der Beek and Shannon Sossaman into the movie, I had to give up any back end that I had so that they would have back end. That was basically what I was faced with. And I was like, I want to make this movie. I need to make this movie. Yeah. It's not that I'm going to take a loss making this movie. Yeah. I'm going to take a loss making this and I'll make it up doing writing jobs, which is how I do it. I work on writing jobs and I do writing work, and then I make a movie and I lose money. And that's basically, how that worked. I gave up my salary because I cut $6 million out of that budget.
Wow.
It had to come from somewhere. You have to be willing to set the example. Sure. I did a music video with the Go-Go's once, and there was a shot that I wanted, which was originally I wanted to blow a bunch of cobwebs into their face, and I got quickly told by the props guy, "You can't do that, Roger. That stuff, it's like sprays hot glue, basically. It's like hot oil will get sprayed in the Go-Go's face." And I was like, well, what else could we do? And I was like, oh, I know what we'll do. I'm going to paint a room gold, and I'm going to put them in this golden room. It's like the hell of their own riches. And then I'm going to get these fans. I'm going to blow a bunch of gold glitter into their faces and into these close-ups. So I got all this glitter and a ton of gold glitter. Like we're making this music video and fans and everything, and the Go-Go's are there, and I shoot all the other stuff, and I shoot the performance scene with them that we need to do, and I'm getting all my footage and everything, and finally comes the point of, okay, now let's shoot the close-ups that we have to do, which is them kind of in this swirl of glitter, visual swirl of glitter that I wanted. Well, when I'm doing I think one of them, Charlotte maybe, or maybe it was Belinda, said, this is that going to hurt? And they were looking at the glitter, and it's like little chopped up pieces of metal, like little tiny bits of metal. And I was like, no, it's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt at all. And they're like, are you sure about that? And I was like, no, here, I'll do it first. So I got there in front of the camera, turned on the fans, rolled film. They started spraying the glitter down. Let me tell you something. It felt like fire ants were being blown into my face. It was like little needles were stabbing me all over my face. And I sat there smiling, like as this stuff blasted into me. And then when it was done, I was like, felt great. And one by one, those Go-Go's went in there and did it. And afterwards, each one of them was like, well, it's an experience. You do have to go through it to understand it. And then I started getting calls from them days later, and they're like, this glitter will not come out of my skin. I can't get it out of my eyelids. It's true. Like no amount of washing would get it off of me. It was like I was covered in glitter.
Gnarly.
I was covered in glitter
gnarly.
for like 3 weeks.
Dang.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were talking about.
You have to be willing to do it yourself. That's the point.
Sure.
You have whatever you're willing to ask somebody else to do, you have to be willing to do yourself. You have to be willing. If you're going to ask somebody to do something dangerous, I mean, unless it's a stunt and a stunt man is doing it and he's the professional to do that. But I never, even with stunt people, I hate asking them. I hate it when a stunt guy does something like in Rules of Attraction, James Van Der Beek hangs himself and then it breaks and he falls onto the floor. Yeah. And okay, that's a stunt guy. I've got to bring a stunt guy in. James has his stunt double. It was a guy he always worked with. He was this is so-and-so. He worked with me on Texas Rangers and whatever, like he's the best. And so this guy came in, get him up there. He's hanging from the thing. It's like a kind of trigger release, like, and like the trigger release, like electronically releases, and it dropped him from like a cable that we had on him,
right?
Like 8 feet onto the ground, and he like lands on his like on his back, and he does it. And it's like, oh, geez, is he okay? And I went up and he's like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm great. Let's go again. No, I think we got it. No, let's go again. I really think we can do better. And I think we got it. That guy did it like 3 times. Then I later found out, no, they want to go again because, they get paid for every gag that you do. I was like, well, Canadian stunt guy. I had this one Canadian stunt guy throw himself down a stairway. And I was like, on a location scout. He's like, oh, this will be great. We'll have people go down this stairway. And he's the coordinator. And he dove down that stairway. It was like a sharp wood stairway in a basement. It's like, dude, and he's like 60 years old. I was like, dude, you're going to kill yourself.
You're talking about on the back end, though, that you gave that up so you could give it to the cast members. So does that mean
they all did very well? By the way, I got a call from Shannon once. She was like, "Oh my God, that check came," and it was like, it came just in time. When you say, that residual check.
When you're talking about like back end, so that's like the residuals. Is that royalties?
Well, there's residuals. There's there's a net system and then a gross system, and like you'll basically whatever you think you're getting, they're already ripping you off. Like at every layer, they're stealing, and so that there is nothing eventually when it gets to you.
Like the Hollywood accounting, is that what it's called?
It's Hollywood accounting. Well, in fact, I encourage everyone to go on the WikiLeaks, if it's still in existence, and check out that Sony leak, because you can access all of their marketing documents, all of their spreadsheets, all of their budgets, all of their their sales stuff, their inter-office correspondence. It's all there, and you start looking at it, and you're like, okay, I'm able with a bird's eye view to look at all of the system and the finances of the system. that's making these series of movies by this one director. They keep making movies with this guy. The movies are making this much. They're costing this much. They're insisting by contract that they cost this much. And it's like, I can't remember what it was, like 40 something million dollars for these kind of chamber piece movies. And there's no way at all that these films can make money the way that it's designed. Like, what is going on here? This is not a real business. And now I kind of realize I don't think it is a real business. I think it's just like a big fake business. And every now and then, every now and then a movie breaks through and becomes a hit, like Pulp Fiction did, and it makes so much money that they simply cannot hide it. They just cannot hide the money. And so they end up having to, but like Beowulf, for example, 2 people had profit participation on Beowulf. Me and Neil Gaiman, the 2 of us, and Angelina Jolie. We were the only people who had profit participation. And that profit participation kicked in when the movie reached 100 million. Well, that movie made 98, well, not even more than that, like 99 point something. Like, it made barely, and they pulled it from theaters and they pulled it out. Like, these guys, they were so skilled in what they did. They so knew how to handle it that they pulled the movie before it would trigger any kind of participation payments to me and Angelina Jolie and to Neil. And so, you know, we didn't see that money either.
Wow. And so you don't get any royalties for the Rules of Attraction?
No.
Nothing?
No, well, actually, I get Writers Guild. Writers Guild has a kind of residual system built in. So as a writer on that film, and like I think
but not as a director.
I could only make. I did make Writers Guild minimum on that film, which was because for the script that I had written, because the Writers Guild is in existence, they forced them to. I would have given it up though if I could have. That's how bad I wanted to make the movie.
Okay.
But by the way, none of this I did without like full cognizance.
Sure. Just because we're limited here on time, I want to just try to power through some of the rest
power
of
through
questions I have.
So the answer is there is no Hollywood. There is still more media getting made than ever, but you can do it from anywhere and just find just gravitate towards what you love.
Okay.
And by the way, I don't even know that that's even a thing anymore. Sure. Like I with the way things are going, it's going to be like one person show in no time.
Damien, can you pull up, there's the Wikipedia article. So I want to ask you this, and I don't know if this was part of some of the, perhaps, at least what's reported online, they say it was a falling out with Quentin. I don't know if that was actually the case, but can you pull that up? So the feature film, 1994 for Pulp Fiction, and then, so it says story.
Yes, stories.
It doesn't say
stories.
And then can you, there's another wiki, I think, for Pulp Fiction.
That was not a Writers Guild project, Pulp Fiction.
Next one. One sec, we're just getting it pulled up here. So it says written by Quentin Tarantino and then story by Quentin Tarantino, Roger Avary. I was curious, so on the previous page it said story. So I mean, what does that mean?
Well, that means that look, I was in I was preparing Killing. I was in post. I was actually doing color wedges at the lab on it and trying to match shots and make sure that every shot was color graded correctly so that the movie looked good. So shots didn't change in color temperature as you watch it.
Right.
And so I was there working, and I got a call from Quentin, and he basically said, listen, I want to rearrange the credits and to read a certain way. And primarily it was so that this movie that he would have ownership over the film as filmmaker ownership. So it could be like Quentin Tarantino. Look, I don't care. I was there from the beginning. Working on it. It begins as as a bunch of short films a series of short films that we're planning on making. Mine was one of those short films called Pandemonium Reigned. Quentin had one. It was called Reservoir Dogs. And if you watch Reservoir Dogs, you'll see that all of the flashbacks Tim Roth flashbacks were added to make it a feature film. And that was originally a segment of Pulp Fiction. In fact, the diamonds or the briefcase, that's the briefcase in probably theoretically, one could say, the briefcase in Reservoir Dogs. And so, so I was there working, like, look, we had a long history making that movie where I was producing it at one point. We were trying to get it, I was producing True Romance at that time. Like, we were trying to get things going when how do I describe it? It's like, first of all, it's a long time ago now. Secondly, like, so much has been written about it that people trying to figure out how it happened and why, and there must have been something like nefarious about it, or that like somebody is being robbed of credit, and I just don't care. Sure. And I never did. It's like I kind of viewed, because Quentin and I like best friends, and the way I viewed it was, like, I'm here to help make this movie the best that it can possibly be. However, I have to do that. As much or as little as I have to do, I'm willing to do. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that was on everything that Quentin did. On Natural Born Killers, same thing. There's a scene I wrote for Natural Born Killers that Quentin had to write and didn't feel like writing and wasn't feeling it and asked me to do it. And so I wrote it. Oliver Stone loved that scene. It was the Brothers Hun scene. And you can see it, I think, on the Blu-ray or on the Laserdisc or somewhere. I mean, probably on YouTube. You can probably look up the Brothers Hun. And it didn't make it into the movie. Oliver Stone said he kind of messed it up a little bit. Okay, I just wrote that because Quentin asked me to.
Sure.
Not asking for credit on Natural Born Killers, and so when it came about, it was like, look, there is a lot of me in Pulp Fiction, and especially in the Butch sequence, the boxer who throws the fight. Like, that was basically my section.
Like the Bruce Willis stuff.
The Bruce Willis stuff. That was sort of my section.
Right.
And it was from this script that I did that was originally a small piece of Pulp Fiction that I had expanded out. I'd added this whole kind of highfalutin ending to it and turned it into a much longer feature-length screenplay. And then when the time came after Quentin made Reservoir Dogs, he just called me up and he said, hey, I'm thinking about like this and that, and I'm offered this and I'm offered that, but I think I want to do Pulp Fiction, and I think I want to direct all of them, because originally it was going to be like an omnibus movie where 3 directors make 3 movies that are neo-noir crime films, and we put them together. That was a thing that was happening back then. And he's like, I want to do it all myself. I'm like, great. Okay, so I'm making Killing Zoe. I'm preparing another project. I've got my own stuff going on. Quentin calls me up and he wants things to be a certain way. Fine. It's a certain way. I didn't know in that moment, like, I knew that we were making something special because everybody, like, John Travolta was in it. Like, that's how, and Bruce Willis was in it. Mm-hmm. Bruce Willis is suddenly in the movie. Bruce Willis is like, at the moment, in that moment, one of the world's biggest stars, arguably the world's biggest star. Suddenly Bruce Willis is in the movie. Suddenly it's a very different film. Suddenly it's making 100 million. Suddenly it's making 200 million. Suddenly it's like Citizen Kane. Suddenly it's on all the top 10 lists of the film. Suddenly you're winning Academy Awards. Suddenly your rate changes, and suddenly everything is bonkers. Suddenly there's money, and there's publicists, and there's agents, and there's attorneys, and there's like press, and the press is writing stories, and they're writing stories about these video store guys. Effectively, we're video store guys, and they're writing these stories about us, and this is like a movement or something, and they're talking about that, and it alters the dynamic of a friendship. It just changes how things are, and it wasn't a credit issue between us that created any kind of cooling between Quentin and I. It was the business that did that. It was, the Quentin machine that came together. Like, Roger doesn't really fit into the Quentin machine. And by the way, Roger's doing his own thing. And so that's okay. And Roger's an unknown quantity also.
Yeah.
And so, it just, like a slight cooling happened between, like, show me two brothers who don't fight. Who haven't fought. Like, we're not like the Oasis guys or anything like that, or maybe we are. Like, and or Guns N' Roses. Yeah. It's like once the kind of pandemic happened, I started thinking nothing matters anymore with respect to the industry. Also, I had been through a very public accident, a DUI-related accident. There had been a death involved. I had served time for it. It was like an atom bomb that got dropped on my life by myself, and and I was recovering from that on behalf of my family. My family was recovering from that, and I was just doing anything I could to survive and to to stay afloat. I stopped caring so much in that moment about what other people think. In fact, I don't care at all what other people think at all. I want people to be happy, but I don't really care how they think about me. That's a better way of putting it. Like, it's okay if somebody hates my work or says something bad about me. That's okay. Like, the worst has already been said, and I've already paid for it, and it's been a gnarly road, and it is the worst thing that has occurred during the course of my life. But at the same time, the Chinese character for crisis contains inside of it the character for opportunity, and because the two are synonymous almost, crisis and opportunity. And in many ways, I felt like I was asleep. That I was asleep in life. And then that happened. And, suddenly you find yourself kneeling on the asphalt in the dark and just begging for life. And it changes your perspective of what matters. To be a really maybe effective director, you probably have to be really like a megalomaniac. You have to be up your own ass. You have to believe that you're right, even when everybody tells you you're wrong. And that kind of left me, I think, a little bit. And I consider everything differently. I'm grateful for simple existence. I'm grateful for what I have. I'm grateful for, every day I wake up, my first thought is of the terrible loss that happened at my hand, and what can I do to, what can I do every day to make amends for that? And you can't really. It is irreversible. The only thing you can do is to honor life as you move forward, and to do that, you have to kind of put ego aside to a certain extent. Yeah. Now, I'm a film director. Like, I get lost in ego. I am something of a megalomaniac also. But every morning, I try to remind myself, I wake up, and my first thought is of what happened and what can I do now, today, to, I don't want to say atone for it. Look, I've done time over it. That, time to yourself inside of your own head, having everything taken away from you and stripped away from you, and collapsing and hitting bottom is not always a bad thing, because the journey is not over. and you suddenly wake up and you look at life through a different lens. You have a different perspective on things, and the squabbles of youth don't matter.
Right.
The ego of ownership over a title of something doesn't matter to me. Like, I've thought about making movies without credits at all, even, like, since then. Like, that everybody in the press started, like, after they ran out of the story of telling the story of Quentin building him up, they then looked to, well, we've run out of stories to tell. What do we do now? Well, now let's do the story where we tear him down a little bit. And I became a useful idiot in some ways towards that. Something I regret to this day. If I ever said anything,
right.
Against my friend out of anger or anything like that, those were words spoken in haste.
Yeah.
And Quentin said the same thing to me. Like, in the interim, he's become a father. He's married. He's a father now. It's altered who he is also. So we're still the same people, but look, we've walked like a long road together. We've both made a lot of movies. And in the end, what really matters to me are people and the relationships that we have in life. And I am grateful for Quentin and I having this kind of character arc where we circle back together, and that we're now able to basically do what we used to do when we were at the video store, and we are having like a ball doing it and having a great time. And that's effectively talking about movies. It's something that obviously I love to do. Have I stopped making movies? No. I actually am. I own the rights to Glamorama, the Bret Easton Ellis novel. I've been preparing it for a very, very long time. When the pandemic began, I decided to stop working on it because I thought, like Rules of Attraction coming out after 9/11, nobody wants or needs this right now. We're now at the point where I think irony can come back into the picture, and I'm more interested in Glamorama now because we're living it. It's around us at all times, and so
be great to...
and so I'm working on that. I've got other projects that I'm working on, but for the most part, like film stuff that I'm pulling together. But like, I wrote a movie about Salvador Dali. I've had everybody attached to it. I've had Al Pacino has been attached to it. Adrian Brody has been attached to it. Russell Brand has been attached to it. Like, I've had all sorts of Dalis attached to the film, and the movie never really found flight.
Right.
Well, it's finally gotten to the point where I can't make that movie. I don't want to make that movie unless I can shoot it on film. Like, it won't have the right texture for my eye. And so like, you have to really want to do it.
Sure.
You have to really want to.
We have a chat here from Daniel Nasiri. Have you seen these AI short movies made by Sam Altman's new software? How do you think this will affect the movie industry? Do you think producers will start rising from the middle of nowhere? Before I have you answer this, I do have a few more questions. We'll get through that. I need to get up for just a brief moment, but while I get up, do you want to just
sure
your thoughts on the AI video stuff that's really interesting?
Absolutely. I look, I'm mostly bemused by AI, like everybody. Let's see, where am I looking? Am I live there? Okay, good. I'm mostly I'm interested in it, like everybody. I loved looking at, hot dog fingers and banana hands and all the kind of weird stuff that it would come up with. I think there's an almost kind of demonic element to it where it taps into a kind of unknown, which is more what you think simulacra and simulation is, in the sense of Baudelaire, and the author Baudelaire. And Glamorama deals a lot with issues of this. And I've watched a bunch of AI stuff. I think some of it is good. I think individual examples are good. The very best work that I've seen that has kind of actually made me think this is something is the Door Brothers, who I think is actually one person. But the Door Brothers did Lies Wide Shut. And I saw that and I was like, oh my God, it's punk rock. They're doing it. This is the punk rock tool. This is where it's at. And then they did another one called Truffles. That's really good. Now, these are almost music video like part of it is they can't really control 100% of what's happening. But life is like that when you shoot something. I've noticed that when the Dore brothers have been doing short films where it's meant to cut together, it's not working for me. They're having the same issue that music video directors and commercial directors traditionally have.
Sure.
Which is a difficulty with
gotcha.
Like separate shots, dialogue cutting together.
Yeah. We have maybe a quick answer on this one. Did you really shoot a Fox Force 5 TV show starring Uma Thurman? I don't know what.
No, but Fox Force 5 is the idea of Kill Bill is like she was in this Uma Thurman's character in Pulp Fiction was in Fox Force 5. Kill Bill is Fox Force 5.
Right.
I mean, that's the TV show, basically.
Jasons_Supra donated $99.
Wow.
Hi,
Thank
Roger.
you, Jason.
Pulp Fiction is a masterpiece. There is a theory online that Vincent and Mia didn't actually win the twist contest and stole the trophy. Is that true? Thanks. Sincerely a massive fan, Jason.
Okay, I don't know if that's true or not, and I will actually ask Quentin about that and maybe address it on one of Gala's after shows or something.
Cool. Yeah.
I'll actually find out the truth behind that. But I would say that in the reality of Quentin, that it's possible Quentin would have stolen the trophy. And Quentin, I think in many ways I'm Vincent, actually.
Okay.
Quentin is the Sam Jackson. He's Jules.
Interesting.
Like
He's
if
the
you
black guy.
Yeah. If there's two of that's the two of us, that's us.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah, I think he would. Yeah, I think there's some credence to it, but I'm gonna go to the source.
And then I'll try to get through these as quickly as possible, just because we are getting a little short on time here.
Yeah, I'm being given the wrap, like during the Academy Awards,
the music.
They flash on wrap up, and then they dial up. I'm getting that right now. It's like my flashback nightmare.
Damien, there's YouTube comments. So you had a YouTube channel. You posted clips from The Rules of Attraction, some other stuff, teasers, trailers. I actually was when I was researching and preparing for the interview, I was looking at some of your stuff. Damien, there's a lot
of it. Most of it's gotten pulled,
yeah,
even though they don't really have a foundation to pull from because
fair use.
Yeah, I'm using it under fair use, but
Damien, can you pull it up, please?
People.
So scroll down. So I actually discovered I left a comment 7 years ago.
Wow!
Hey, Roger,
look at that.
Any chance of a glitterati screening? So that kind of gets us into that. But before we do that, we'll pull up the other
there is
YouTube,
a chance of that. There is a chance of that.
YouTube 7 years ago. Okay.
Wow.
And then this.
Wow. So that's like the proof of the pudding.
Dedication.
You're the real deal.
Roger, when are you going to return to directing? 8 years ago. So yeah.
Well, it's funny. I've directed
directed
several movies since then.
Yeah.
One was Lucky Day.
Yep.
But one hasn't even been released. It's called La Voix Humaine. It's a French language film based on a one-woman play written by Jean Cocteau. It's a feature-length film. Gala produced it. We shot in France, in Paris. It stars Elsa Zilberstein. I think it's maybe one of the best things. One of the best things.
But it's not released?
It's not been released. Okay. The gay mafia got involved.
The gay
mafia. There's a gay mafia that runs everything.
In France,
Pedro Almodovar, I'm sure, is a member of it.
Okay.
And he called up the Fondation Jean Cocteau and said he wants to make La Voix Humaine. And I think he did it as a short film with Tilda Swinton. And I love Tilda. I haven't seen their Voix Humaine, but and so the foundation, La Fondation Jean Cocteau, pulled after we shot the film, and they have in France, they have rule of law over rights.
Over that stuff, right.
And so the movie became unreleasable. And it turns out Peter Medek, the director Peter Medek, did The Ruling Class and Men's Club and a bunch of other movies. He also directed a movie called La Voix Humaine. Same thing apparently happened to it. I think you can get that one on video now, but same thing. They like buried the title. It'll find its way out. And I heard somebody ask about Glitterati, and the answer is yes. There will be a screening. No, I will not announce it.
Okay.
It will just happen.
Okay. Yeah, Sergio says... Hey,
but it will be I'm going to do a public screening.
Okay.
It'll just happen.
Sergio just says, "Are you
next year? Maybe. Let's say next year.
Okay.
Yeah, let's say that.
Let me know. I want to go. Are y'all ever gonna release the full footage of Victor's European trip from Rules of Attraction and he's so that's essentially what Glitterati is the film that you made of all that footage.
I shot 70 hours of footage to do that little
2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
2 weeks, 12 cities.
Yeah, just under 2 weeks, but in 12 cities.
Yep.
And basically just he was in character 24 hours a day, and I was silent 24 hours a day following him. And then we shot this. Whatever happened. And we would go to a model party, and he would go back to the room with the models, and I would go with them and shoot whatever happened and cut it together. And we made a kind of tone film sort of on the side that uses music as kind of its narrative driver, and I think almost too much has been made of it now, that because I haven't shown it, that people are so anticipating it that once they see it, they're going to be like, that's it?
They're going to be disappointed.
It can only be disappointed at this point. I probably should have just, but I I paid for the European sequence out of my own pocket. Like when we went because we didn't have the budget for it. If I wanted it, we had to Greg Shapiro, the producer, me and Kip basically went on our own to Europe in the months following 9/11, when everything was still scrambled. There was still like everything was still going crazy everywhere. And that's when we just shot and I told him, whatever you're doing, I'm going to be there with a macro lens. I'm going to shoot everything. My one thing is I have full access to everything you do, and that you remain in character. And he only broke character once. And that was, he got upset at Greg Shapiro because he didn't want to carry his own luggage or something. And Greg was like, I'm not carrying your luggage.
Well, you mentioned, I know you had mentioned this a bit earlier on in the conversation, and just now you mentioned, September 11th, 2001, that the opening scene of the film, the End of the World Party, if I recall correctly, that was shot on September 11th, 2001. Do you think that in a way, like some of the perhaps unease or tension or sadness in terms of the crew, the cast on that day, it actually kind of maybe translated to actually it's supposed to be a party, but it's like, there's kind of it's underlying tension.
Yeah, there's a sense of doom underneath everything. Yeah, it was a cataclysmic day, and we were, you have to make a decision about things, and I had to cut shots, and I made a couple of small choices that changed the ending of the movie in that moment, because originally, the movie, believe it or not, was much more nihilistic in the end. It has a much darker conclusion than what it has now, which is a kind of refusal or a refute against manifest destiny as a concept. And that choice is something that we have. This was a choice I made in the moment while shooting, and altered what happens at the end of the film. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but that happens constantly. You're constantly changing. It rains and you planned for sunshine. Okay, what does that mean? Do you pretend that it's not raining, or do you embrace the rain? You embrace the rain. It's raining. The universe gave you rain. Use it. The
character in the film, Lauren, she she's wearing a 7-pin. Can you pull that up, Damien? The YouTube video. She's wearing a 7-pin, and I was always curious about that. And she's wearing it throughout the film, whenever she's kind of wearing that trench coat thing that she wears frequently.
There's a lot of numerology throughout the movie.
Can you pull that up, Damien?
Most of it people haven't noticed, but the movie was made as a palindrome.
Go full screen. Full screen. So she's wearing the 7-pin. I was curious if there's like a backstory to that, because I started wearing
Oh, really?
a 7-pin.
What do you think it meant?
No idea. I know 7's a lucky number, but no idea.
So they say. Well, yeah, I mean, let's just say, because there's certain things that I don't really talk too much about, and part of it is you don't want to give up the hidden code of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Let's just say the hermetic code
Seven deadly sins?
within the film, and like everything about the movie is numerology. From the music, because if you listen to the music backwards and forwards, it's two different pieces. Because what we did was I had Andy Milburn, my composer, basically used phonemes to figure out how to compose music in transverse direction, and so that you can hide music inside of music, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, playing a record backwards and hearing like, John is dead or Paul is dead or whatever the famous Beatles one was. I think Tones on Tail had one that was like, maybe it was the Beatles, like number nine. And so we got really heavily into that, because the movie was released in 2002, which is also a palindromic year. All of the music is palindromic. And so there's, from the aspect ratio of the movie to the number 7 there is a meaning behind everything, and there is a code behind everything. And part of this is my belief that, movies like stained glass windows in churches have a kind of primal optical effect on the brain, and you see things in your soul that you don't see, with your mind. You see it with your heart that you don't see with your mind. And those things sometimes sneak their way in. And the very best movies are hiding their secrets. And that's why you keep wanting to go back to them. I think earlier I mentioned escapist movies as being really important to people. People need escapism. You go to a movie, you see the movie, you escape your lives. And then when you leave the movie behind. It served its purpose. The other kind of movie is one that asks questions at the end of the film. The one that makes you like, you start asking questions. You're creating debate. You're arguing over it. You leave the theater and not everybody understands what happened. Everybody's arguing over it. You're discussing over it. You're trying to figure out what it means. You're still trying to figure out what 2001 Space Odyssey means. It's better to not know. And that's because
I can't get the scoop. Can I get the scoop on the 7? No,
on the
fine.
7?
No, it's fine.
Well, that was kind of a scoop. It's a half scoop.
Yeah, it was a half scoop.
I'll tell you off camera.
Sure. That works for me. And I think just final things here. If you were to revisit the rules of attraction today, do you think there's anything you'd do differently?
I'd shoot it in Isla Vista.
That would be it would be perfect setting. Perfect setting for this kind of film.
You could make the movie like kind of again today, and you could make a completely different movie out of it, because the book is very different than the movie. And the thing that's important to maintain, and I even tried to do this, like I tried to set the movie in a kind of non-80s, non-90s, non-2000s time period. It's kind of a little bit of a mess time-wise with the music, I did that a little bit intentionally because I didn't want it to be about the 80s. Like, it's not about the 80s. People have been going through these issues, since ancient times.
You're right. Yeah.
Things don't change. We believe, we are arrogant in that we believe that we are unique and that our experiences are unique, when in fact it's all been done before. It's all happened before. Nothing that, it may be new to you, but it's not new.
And I'm trying to think if there's one other thing. maybe 2. Oh, I just know that you wrote a letter to George Michael because there's this faith scene.
I love George Michael. Yeah.
And you wrote
It was an improv scene, like most things. We were shooting in this hotel room. We were shooting at the Four Seasons, and the scene was on a bed, and I had just shot some scenes, and Ian Somerhalder was in makeup, and the other actor who was there. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I love this guy. He's like incredible. I'm just tired at the end of a long day. Russell Sams. Russell Sams, who was like this young actor, came in and did a fuck you audition. Like, I'm not getting this part. Like, there's no way I'm getting this part. Right. Came in and basically did this to me. Fuck you. And there's the actress. Fuck you too. Like to Shannon Sossman, because she was in the audition. Yeah. He kicked me, actually, and left. My casting director was like, well, fuck that guy. And I was like, no, go get that guy. That's the guy. And he was like, you're kidding me. I brought him back. I was like, I just want you to be that irreverent on set. And that's how I cast him.
Nice. He
was amazing on set. So I'm shooting with him in this hotel room. We finish up what we're working on, and I'm like, okay, I've got a camera, I've got a crew, I've got everything. I've shot everything I needed, but I have like another 10 minutes. Well, I'm not going to waste time. He's dressed like George Michael. He's got like a jacket and the glasses. And he looked like George Michael in Faith.
Right.
And so I was like, hey, I have a George Michael CD down in my car. I had that CD, and so I had somebody go down and get it, or maybe somebody else had it. They brought it up, and I said, "You're just for fun for the dailies, for tomorrow when we're watching dailies. I'm going to have you do a striptease for us on the bed to George Michael's Faith. How do you like that?" Okay, so he's a young actor. He's like excited to be there. He'll do anything for me. I mean, Fred Savage drove 2 hours to be on location for James Van Der Beek to spit on him, and he was like, let's do another take. So like young actors, they want to do it. They want to engage. And so
he got spit on?
Yeah, James Van Der Beek. I was like, James spit on
or the clarinet scene?
Yeah, no, that was the scene in the car when they go to the drug deal and they're coming back from the drug deal. And he's like, "You're crazy, man." He's like, "Define crazy." And then they park.
Wait, no, Wait, not Fred Savage. That's.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Did I say Fred Savage?
Yeah,
I meant
Ian from American Pie.
It's actually the guy from American Pie.
It's the guy from.
What's his name? My God,
Thomas Ian
Nicholas.
Is that it?
Yeah, Thomas Ian Nicholas. I love Thomas. He's such.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're right. That was Thomas Ian Nicholas. God, I can't believe I got that wrong. It was Thomas Ian Nicholas.
Well, there's a lot of people in the movie.
Yeah, and he showed up on Fred Savage. Same thing. Like, hey. What do you do? Oh, I play the clarinet. Do you have a clarinet with you? Yeah, I have one in my car. Go get it. And like next thing you know, he's playing the clarinet.
He's got the cigarette in the belly button.
I said, oh, and when you just use your belly button to hold your cigarette, like you just make up stuff in the moment. So,
So in any case, you did that scene with.
I did that scene. I just set up the camera. I'm like, I'll get one shot. I've only got 10 minutes. I set up a camera with a wide lens, like a Kubrickian shot. I said, I want a Kubrick shot, a 0-point perspective shot of the bed. And I want you dancing on the bed to George Michael. So I put it on. We put on George Michael. Okay, everybody on the crew starts like getting into it. We're watching it and we're like, this is hilarious. He's fantastic. This is great. Ian Somerhalder is walking by like in his bathrobe coming from hair and makeup. He's just cleaned up. He's in his underwear. He's got a bathrobe on. He looks in the room and he's like, what's going on? They're shooting. And I look over and I see him. He's like, what is happening? And I like, get in, like go in. And he jumped in, like literally just threw off his bathrobe and jumped in with no preparation at all. Like that's how these actors were on that film. And it was so much fun that like no intimacy coordinator, nobody telling me what I can and can't do. Actors enthusiastic to push the ceiling as far as they can and to go for it. I shot the scene. It was so good. I was like, how am I going to get this in the movie? We don't have a budget for the song. There's no way I can afford that song. But I found out that he's at CAA. I befriended the agent. His agent was Brian Laux. this great, the agent that I love at CAA, Brian Laux. He basically said, let me call George. Let me write a little letter. And so I wrote George a letter. He sent it to him. I sent him the scene. He said, I love it. You can have the song. He gave it for free.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So no one can say anything negative to me about George Michael.
Yeah.
To me, George Michael is one of the coolest guys. He's a friend to an artist. He was, and I think that shot is one of the best shots I've ever done. Like when people imitated it on YouTube, I was like, okay, now I can die happy.
Yeah. We have a final message here from Claudia. I think we might have already kind of got into this. Do you share the same sentiment on film that Quentin does, that digital film will be? I think we kind of
done it in depth, and the quick answer to that is both of them are paints, and depending on your project, use the correct paint.
Sweet. Well, Roger, thank you so much for
this was really fun. This was really fun. This was a little bit like a dissertation, like a what do you call it? A deposition. A little bit like therapy. A little bit like an interview. Yeah.
Where can people find you? Is there anything you want to plug?
You can find me at patreon.com/video archives, where we're doing the Video Archives podcast. I mean, the podcast is, you can also listen to big chunks of it on Spotify or Apple or whatever. But for all the meat and potatoes and all the trimmings, if you want cranberry sauce, and if you want Durkee green bean salad as well, that's what Patreon is for.
Sweet.
And that's mostly because we've gone independent. We were on SiriusXM before, and they were wonderful. They were fantastic. But the truth of the matter is, they really wanted us to do like the big hits, like Jaws and Godfather. They just do the big ones, do the ones everybody knows, do the ones we love. And Quentin is on a quest of exploration. And so we didn't want to have to fight those fights, which were constant. We wanted to instead, we wanted to create a model where Quentin could explore and do exactly what he wants to do. And so far so good. Great. So patreon.com/video archives, or you can go to avary.com, avary.com, or to discover our socials.
Perfect. We have all the links in the description of the video.
Perfect.
Great conversation. Thank you so much for
thank you, and thank you for everybody out there.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
We have all the links in the description if you want to go check out the podcast that you have with Quentin Tarantino. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in live. I hope you guys have a good night. 07's in the chat. And we'll see you guys on Sunday for our dating talk. We'll get you on that now.
I'm kind of disappointed. I would love to come on here.
Gala, are we getting you on one of the dating talks?
Well, actually, you know what? If I were to come on, she would have to come on with me.
Okay.
Because then, because she keeps it real. She keeps me real.
Yeah.
Like the Roger that you get when Gala is around, that's the real Roger. I
should have had her do the
interview.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing interviews with her all the time.
You guys. Do.
So,
cool.
But I would love to come on your show. Yeah, absolutely.
We could hear some dating anecdotes from the set, and I'm sure there's a lot of interesting stuff.
We had all sorts of crazy stuff happen. The little kid Jesse Hyman, who was an extra on set. Kind of. You look at him. He's like
the guy who's in everything.
He's the world's most famous extra.
Yeah.
Well, I started him. I was the guy who started him, and the way I started him was he was at the Dress to Get Screwed party, and I was dude, you over there, and I had Ron Jeremy.
You did him a solid.
Yeah, I had Ron Jeremy had all these porn stars on. I called up Ron Jeremy and I said, "Listen, I need a bunch of people who are comfortable being naked."
Yeah.
And so he called up all of his friends, and they all came, and they're all excited to be there. We're paying them, and they're at the party, and they're doing their thing. And I'm like, "Okay, you two girls, your thing is all night long. You're gonna just be on this kid. You are gonna make his life the best life possible tonight."
Yeah.
And I remember Shannon Sossaman sitting at the monitors, like behind camera, like laughing, and we're shooting the scene with him. And just off camera is his underwear, and Shannon was watching. She's like, "Oh, I love watching it grow."
That, I mean,
because he was like constantly like getting erect.
That's really funny though. I know the exact scene that you're talking about. You probably made that probably the best day.
I'm still in touch with that guy. I love that kid.
Yeah.
He's great. He was a great extra. Yeah, he was a great extra. And then there's, I mean, there was all sorts of people on that set. Like, you know, the guy who plays me on there, the dumb guy from LA, kind of blonde-looking guy with a hat on at the Dressed to Get Screwed party. That guy became like a big director. He's like,
really?
He became really
the guys who are playing quarters,
like directs horror movies. He's really good, fine director.
That's awesome.
So, and it's like my alternate existence.
Nice.
So
very cool. Very cool. Well, anyhow, thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I hope you guys have a good night. We'll see you guys on Sunday. Good night.
What a pleasure.